I woke up confused. There was a beautiful girl beneath me, crying and trembling, calling me husband. Her shoulders were bleeding, her clothes torn. I had no idea what was going on. My name is Lu Feng. Just moments ago, I was on a special mission deep in a forest, and now suddenly I'm here, in some broken-down shack. Then memories flooded into my head. I had transmigrated into another body, in a place called Siwa Village, on the border of the Great Li Empire. The guy whose body I took over was a real piece of trash, a lazy drunk, a bully, a complete waste of a man. The empire itself was falling apart. Enemies attacking the borders, corrupt officials squeezing every last grain from the people, and famine everywhere. In this province, Yuzhou, families had to give up 80% of their harvest as tax. Every man over 14 was forced into the army. Girls over 13 had to marry or their families would be punished. The girl in front of me, Wan Qing, came from a decent family. She and her older sister, Wan Qing, were forced to marry this body's original owner because their family was running out of time. So I got 2 wives, a pair of sisters. But instead of treating them well, the old Lu Feng drank away all their dowry in months, beat them, tortured them with whips and needles, and now the house had no food left. When I put clothes on her and told her I was going out to find food, she panicked. She begged me not to sell her to a brothel. She promised to do anything, to ask her father for grain, to never complain again. She was terrified of me, or rather, of the man I used to be. I felt bad. I told her gently not to worry, that I would take care of her and her sister from now on. She looked at me like she couldn't believe it. This wasn't the Lu Feng she knew. Her older sister had gone out early to dig for wild vegetables and still hadn't come back, which worried me. But the first problem was simple. We needed food. My stomach was growling. Lucky for me, I had real survival training, hunting, fishing, all of it. I could handle this. I made my decision quickly. Step 1, survive. Step 2, keep surviving. Everything else comes after. When I was about to leave, the older sister Wan Qing came back carrying a broken basket. She saw her little sister crying and immediately begged me to leave her alone, saying she'd go make wild vegetable soup. But when she moved, the scratches on her back from thorns started bleeding badly. She bit her lip to hold back tears. I told them both to stay home, eat the wild vegetables, and wait for me. I was going out to get real food, meat. They looked at each other in disbelief but didn't dare argue. The old Lu Feng was violent and unpredictable, so they just obeyed out of fear. I didn't bother explaining myself. Actions would prove everything. I grabbed a rusty knife and a bag and headed out. Behind me, I could hear them crying. They thought I was taking the bag to sell them off somewhere. I headed toward the mountains. The river nearby had almost no fish left. Too many hungry people had cleaned it out. But few villagers dared hunt in the mountains because of dangerous wild animals, so there was still plenty of game up there. Besides, I needed real meat to rebuild this skinny, starved body. It was autumn, the best time for hunting. I had no bow, just a wooden spear I carved on the way up. Once I reached the slopes, I spotted pheasants and rabbits everywhere. I couldn't catch them by hand, so I set up several traps using vines and branches. Then I heard rustling. A civet cat, fat and happy, eating wild fruit off the ground. It hadn't noticed me. I crept behind a tree, waited for it to come closer, and threw my spear with everything I had. The civet tried to run, but I had already predicted its path. The spear hit its mark. I rushed over and finished it with my knife. I hauled the heavy animal down the mountain fast. The smell of blood could attract bigger predators, and in my current weak state, even a wild boar could kill me. While running, I was already planning. Civet meat is a delicacy worth good money, and the hide is tough enough to make bowstrings. Near the village river, a few women were washing clothes. Most of their husbands had been taken by the army, so they survived by finding other men. When they saw me carrying a fat civet, their eyes went wide. They hadn't seen meat in a long time. They crowded around me, begging for a share. Some offered to cook for me. Some hinted at other favors, anything for a piece of meat. I told them to get out of my way. I got back home and found the 2 sisters staring at a thin bowl of wild vegetable soup, not touching it. They were waiting for me to eat first. That was the rule the old Lu Feng had set. They never dared eat before him. I asked why they hadn't eaten. Wan Qing's eyes filled with tears, afraid I'd hit her just for answering. I told them to look at what I brought, the civet cat. They were shocked. They hadn't seen meat in who knows how long, but I could see the worry in their eyes. They thought I was fattening them up before selling them off. I explained my plan. I'd cut some meat for us to eat and take the rest to sell at the town market. With the money, I could buy better hunting tools. When they finally understood I wasn't selling them, they burst into tears. Looking at them in their torn rags, the old Lu Feng had even pawned their wedding clothes for booze. I felt bad. I needed to earn money and get them proper clothes at least. I asked for a bowl to put the meat in. There was an awkward silence. Wan Qing nervously told me there were no ceramic bowls left. The old me had smashed the last one while beating Wan Qing. All we had were 3 blackened wooden bowls. I skinned and butchered the civet quickly. The sisters stood nearby, desperate to help but afraid to move wrong. They kept blurting out things like, "We can work," and "Please don't sell us," and "We'll behave." I had to tell them to stop crying. I hung some meat on bamboo strips to save for later, set aside the bulk to sell in town, and gave them portions to cook. Soon the smell of cooking meat filled the little kitchen. When the food was ready, they handed me chopsticks and stood back, waiting for me to finish, the old rule. I told them to sit down and eat with me. They froze. They didn't know what to do. They'd never been allowed to eat at the same time. Wan Qing tried to refuse politely, saying I'd worked hard hunting and they didn't deserve to eat. I didn't argue with words. I leaned over and kissed each of them on the cheek. They turned bright red, completely stunned. In months of marriage, the old Lu Feng had never once shown them any tenderness. I pointed at my own cheek and told them to kiss me back. They shyly leaned forward and did it, then stood perfectly still, waiting to see what I'd do next. I walked behind them and gave each of them a playful smack on the behind. I gave each of them a smack and told them it was punishment for not listening. They should have eaten the soup while I was gone instead of waiting. The younger sister, Wan Qing, let out a soft sound and turned bright red, embarrassed. She didn't seem to mind it at all. Her older sister held it together better, but felt the same. Then Wan Qing suddenly hugged me and begged, tears in her eyes, for me to consummate our marriage with both of them. She said even if I beat them or sold them, they couldn't stand being untouched wives. In this place, if a married woman didn't get pregnant, her family would be punished too. That was the real reason they were so desperate. I smiled and told them we'd do it properly, one at a time, tonight. Wan Qing blushed down to her neck. I could tell the two sisters had very different personalities. The older one quiet and gentle, the younger one bold and eager. But first, I made them sit down and eat. I mixed the meat and broth into their wild vegetable soup and gave them big portions. They could barely believe it. The older sister tried to refuse, saying I'd worked harder and deserved more. I told her if she didn't eat, she'd get another smack. That worked. They ate quietly, sneaking glances at me. I finished fast and went outside to exercise. As a soldier, I always trained in the evenings. This body was weak but had decent bones. With proper food and training, I could get it back in shape. While I was working out, I heard footsteps. A man named Li Er showed up with 2 thugs. He was the village bully, the one who had led the original Lu Feng into drinking and gambling. He'd been eyeing my wives for a long time. He started talking filth, saying he and his boys wanted to help me with my wives, that they wanted to turn with them. I told him to say it again. He doubled down, threatening to kill me and take the sisters. I punched him in the throat. Before he could recover, I hit him in the chest so hard he flew into the mud wall. Then I grabbed his head and snapped his neck. He died without even screaming. His 2 thugs froze in terror. They turned to run, but I was faster. A few cracks of breaking bone later, all 3 were dead on the ground. Behind me, the sisters had seen everything from the doorway. Their bowls slipped from their hands and shattered. They were frozen stiff with fear. They'd been beaten by the old Lu Feng plenty of times, but they'd never seen him kill anyone, and certainly not like this, so fast and brutal. I sighed. I'd hoped to handle it before they saw. But then Wan Qing spoke up first. I heard everything clearly. You did it to protect us and our sister. She shook her head. I'm not afraid. Wan Qing quickly followed. I'm not afraid either. Their voices were trembling, but they meant it. I smiled. These 2 were tougher than I expected. I held both sisters close and promised them everything would be all right. They melted into my arms. After all the fear and pain, they finally felt safe. Wan Qing asked shyly if I really wouldn't trick them. I just grinned and told them to go wash up and get ready for bed. I had to deal with the 3 bodies first. I dragged them up the mountain and dumped them deep in the forest. Let the wild animals have them. I'd taken one civet out. Now I was putting a few 100 pounds of meat back in. Fair trade. I rushed home. The night went well. Very well. Both sisters were nervous since it was their first time, but everything worked out. I'll leave it at that. Next morning I woke early with both of them sleeping peacefully in my arms. They'd been so exhausted they actually slept in for once. Normally the old Lu Feng made them get up at dawn to cook. I let them rest. After a night like that, they deserved it. When they woke up, they were different. Wan Qing told me quietly that they were truly mine now and would never leave. The shyness was still there, but the fear was mostly gone. After washing up, I sharpened my rusty knife on a rock, my only weapon, gave the sisters instructions, and headed to town to sell the civet meat. The whole animal was about 30 pounds. I found a restaurant willing to buy it. After the owner rounded down for bones and scraps, I got 2,800 coins, roughly 2.5 taels of silver. In these desperate times, that was serious money. I started shopping. First I went to a blacksmith. The iron quality was poor, smelting technology here was limited, but I found a decent axe, sharp and practical for both hunting and daily work. I also bought arrowheads, since I could make bows and arrows from wood later. I ordered a spear tip to be forged. All of that cost 300 coins. Then I thought about my wives walking around in rags. I couldn't afford silk, but I bought a few bolts of simple cotton fabric. I picked up cotton and reed fluff for winter bedding, plus pots, bowls, and basic kitchen supplies. That ate up another 500 coins. Next was food. At the grain shop, I understood why people starved. Even rough mixed grain cost 30 coins per measure, white rice was 100, and flour was 60. I bought mostly cheap grain with a little rice and flour mixed in. It tasted terrible, but would keep us alive through winter. Come spring, I'd clear land and start farming. Last stop was the medicine shop. Both sisters still had wounds from the old Lu Feng's abuse, and I needed healing supplies for hunting injuries too. Besides, if they didn't heal properly, our nighttime activities would stay limited, and after last night, I knew there was a lot more I wanted to try. As I left the pharmacy loaded with supplies, I noticed something. A man pretending to browse nearby. I'd spotted him 4 times today, always lingering close. When he caught me staring, he glared and walked off toward the gambling house. Someone was following me. I recognized the man following me. He was a worker from the gambling house. The old Lu Feng used to drink and gamble there constantly, losing everything, including the land deed. This guy clearly saw my money and was going to round up some people. I wasn't worried. If they came for me, I'd settle old and new debts at once. I hired an ox cart and rode back to the village loaded with supplies. The whole village came out to stare. After word spread about my hunting, nobody dared bother me directly, but they followed the cart all the way home, drooling. The neighbors crowded around my wives begging for food. Some wanted rice, some wanted fabric, some wanted cotton for their children's coats. I threw my axe into the door plank to shut everyone up. The blade stuck deep, the wood groaning. I told them the deal. If their men cut trees for me, I'd trade 1 tree for 1 pound of rice. I needed lumber to fix my house. But nobody touches my wives or begs from them. I'm the one in charge here. After chasing them off, I gave the sisters the fabric and told them to pick bright colors and make themselves proper clothes and a big warm quilt for winter. They were stunned by the quality of the cloth. Even wealthy families in town rarely used material this nice. They tried to refuse, saying I should have the clothes instead. I knew what they were really thinking. They were still afraid I was dressing them up to sell them for a better price. I felt Wan Qing's hands. Ice cold, her body shivering. Not cold, she says. Liar. I scolded them gently and handed over the medicine, telling them to eat dinner, then strip down and wait for me to treat their wounds. While I was unloading everything, doing all the heavy lifting myself without asking them to help, the sisters decided to make dinner. Wan Qing mentioned that a village woman named Xiao Fong had taken them foraging today and helped them find a big basket of beautiful wild vegetables. My blood went cold. Xiao Fong, that was Li Er's woman. Li Er, whose neck I snapped yesterday. I grabbed the basket and ripped off the cloth covering. Just as I feared, these vegetables were huge and green and perfect. In a famine where people strip bark off trees, vegetables like this don't exist unless they're poisonous. She'd given them toxic plants on purpose. I was furious. That woman was trying to kill us through my own wife's hands. I asked them sharply if they didn't know these were poisonous. They collapsed to the ground in terror, clinging to each other and crying. They thought I was angry at them. Wan Qing begged me to hit her instead of her sister. Wan Qing swore she'd never try to poison me, that she was grateful for everything I'd done. I didn't yell anymore. I just quietly sorted through the basket, pulled out the poisonous ones, and handed back the safe vegetables. I told Wan Qing to cook those. She took the bowl with shaking hands, her eyes completely dead. She thought I was making them eat the poison as punishment. In her mind, poisoning your husband was a capital crime under local law, and letting them die by their own poison would be merciful. She'd already accepted death. The wild vegetables were boiling in the pot. Wan Qing suddenly said she wanted to serve me one last time and started undressing right there, thinking I was about to execute them. I stopped her. She had it all wrong. I carried her to the bedroom, but not for what she expected. I took out the medicine and gently rubbed ointment on the wounds covering her back. While I worked, I explained everything. The man who came to threaten us was Li Er, the village bully and Xiao Fang's lover. Xiao Fang was the one who gave them the poisonous vegetables on purpose. They were new here. They didn't know the connections between people in the village. I never suspected them for a second. Then I called Wan Qing over and treated her wounds too. Both sisters broke down crying as they finally understood. I knew the whole story. I didn't blame them, and I was taking care of them. Their trust in me deepened right there. After we ate dinner, I prepared the poisonous vegetables in a wooden bucket with some rice and headed out to settle things with Xiao Fang. Wan Qing insisted on coming. I was surprised. She seemed so gentle and quiet, but she was firm. In her mind, a woman who tried to murder her husband through trickery deserved death, and she wanted to watch it happen. I respected that. In this brutal world, my women couldn't afford to be soft. Xiao Fang saw us coming and turned white with fear. She'd secretly followed Li Er that night and watched me kill all 3 men with my bare hands. She'd been too terrified to sleep or report it. No evidence would survive the mountain animals anyway. So she'd come up with the poison plan instead, using my innocent wives as the weapon. I told her plainly. I would have let her live, but she kept coming after me. I grabbed her, threw her down, and hit her hard across the face. She tried to run but tripped. I wasn't giving her any chance to beg. I called Wan Qing forward with the bucket. I expected to do it myself, but she stepped up instead. Her hands were trembling, but her eyes were cold. She said it herself. Anyone who tried to kill her husband through their hands deserved to die. She forced open Xiao Fang's jaw and shoved the poisonous vegetables down her throat. Then she lifted the wooden bucket and smashed it over Xiao Fang's head. The bucket shattered. Xiao Fang was dead. The moment it was over, all the strength drained from Wan Qing. She collapsed into my arms, barely breathing, shaking uncontrollably. She whispered that she wouldn't be a burden to me. I held her and told her she was never a burden. I carried her home and left her with Wan Qing to rest. I had more important things to take care of. I started working on a bow. The civet skin I'd saved was dry enough now. I burned off the fur, soaked it, cut it into thin strips, and twisted them together in groups of 3 to make a bowstring. The civet skin had decent flexibility, but wasn't ideal. I'd need proper animal simulator for a stronger bow, or even a crossbow. But for now, this would do. With a real bow, hunting would become much easier. While I was working, I heard thumping outside. I grabbed my axe and went to check. 3 skinny men were standing there, each carrying a log on their shoulders. I couldn't believe it. Someone actually took me up on my offer. The leader was a big guy named Tian Lao Ba, simple and honest. He showed me the logs, good quality fir wood, perfect for building. The other 2, Wang San and Yang the Limper, were the same type, hard-working farmers with no tricks in them, loyal by nature. I called the sisters to bring out grain. I gave each man 2 bowls of mixed rice instead of the one I'd promised. Tian Lao Ba tried to refuse the extra, saying 1 bowl was enough. That kind of honesty made me like him even more. With the right training, a man like him could become a real warrior. I asked them to look for a specific wood called ja wood on the mountain. It's the best material for making bows. Tian Lao Ba said he'd bring some back for free, no payment needed. I insisted on paying fair. After they left, I started thinking bigger. 3 logs for 2 pounds of rice each was a great deal. This fir wood was valuable in the city, but impossible for starving men to transport that far. So they brought it to me instead. I was becoming the middleman, the one with resources. The extra grain and promises were an investment in loyalty. I'd need help for what came next. That got me thinking about building a real house. My shack was falling apart and winter was coming. I planned 3 rooms: living room, bedroom, kitchen, with proper earth walls and a huge heated brick bed. But I'd need over 10,000 mud bricks. That meant mobilizing the whole village, which meant I needed a lot more money. That evening, Tian Lao Ba came back panting, carrying several pieces of wood. They were perfect, just the right thickness, natural curve, good length. I paid him with grain and a piece of meat, then got to work immediately. I shaped the bow blank with my axe. Wood has incredible elasticity and spring. In my old world, a handmade wood bow would sell to collectors for a fortune. I dried it over a grass fire, then made paste from flour and wrapped hemp thread layer by layer around the bow to prevent cracking under pressure. Deer sinew would be better, but hemp would work for now. The sisters watched me in amazement. They'd thought my talk about building a house was just empty words, but now they saw me actually preparing. They went inside and started cleaning up and cooking dinner, quietly doing their part. That evening after dinner, I worked on making arrows. I had the iron arrowheads from town, but I still needed proper wooden shafts. The sisters sat nearby under dim lamplight, sewing the cotton quilt. Wan Qing was calm and focused, while Wan Qing kept giggling and blushing whenever she caught me looking at her. We had another good night together. Early next morning, I headed up the mountain with my new bow. My first stop was where I'd dumped the bodies. Not a trace left, not even blood. Some large predator had devoured everything. That meant dangerous animals were nearby, so I kept my bow ready and stayed alert. After about half an hour, I reached the edge of the old-growth forest. Massive trees, deep valleys, animal calls echoing everywhere. I climbed a ridge to get a high vantage point and spotted exactly what I wanted: deer. I was thrilled. Deer meant valuable meat. But more importantly, deer sinew is the best material for bowstrings and tools. And deer are herd animals, which meant I might get more than one. I tracked them and got within about 30 feet of a big buck, thick antlers with 3 or 4 points, muscular, fat with autumn feeding. I drew my bow and released without hesitation. The arrow punched clean through the deer's body and out the other side. I didn't rush. I followed at a steady pace, watching the buck's breathing get heavier as it bled. Then I picked up speed, even imitating tiger and lion sounds to panic it into running faster and bleeding out quicker. Blood attracts predators, so I needed this done fast. The buck was still moving, so I needed a second shot. The angle was bad, so I kicked off a tree trunk, launched myself into the air, and fired mid-jump. The arrow pierced straight through the heart and pinned into a tree on the other side. The buck collapsed, twitched a few times, and died. I ran over and cursed myself. The deer blood had mostly drained out onto the ground. Deer blood is incredibly valuable, and I'd wasted it. I made a mental note to be smarter next time. I built a quick drag frame from vines and branches and hauled the deer downhill as fast as I could. By the time I reached the village, people were just heading out to work. The village chief, Wang Changsheng, and his wife walked right into me dragging a full-grown buck behind me. They stood there with their mouths open. The chief had apparently scolded his wife for spreading rumors about me turning my life around. Now he was staring at the proof. His wife started nudging him, pointing at the antlers, telling him deer antler wine was some kind of miracle medicine. She gave him a sly smile. On my way home, the village chief Wang Changsheng stopped me. He was in his 30s, lived well compared to everyone else. Big brick house, 100 acres of good farmland. His first wife never gave him children, so he'd spent a fortune buying the top girl from a brothel in the county as his second wife. She'd worn him out completely. He couldn't perform anymore, and she never let him forget it. He tried to lowball me for the deer antlers, offered 2 silver tails, and acted like he was doing me a favor. He even called me by my old humiliating nickname, 3 Legs, from when I used to work at his place. I shut him down fast. I told him if he'd never even tasted swan meat, he had no business dreaming about deer antlers. I told him to get out of my way and walked off. Behind me, I didn't notice his wife was staring at my back, eyes wandering over my muscles. She was already scheming. Since her husband couldn't give her a child, maybe someone else could. As long as the baby carried the Wang name, who'd know the difference? Back home, the sisters were amazed by the deer. I let them start preparing some meat while I went out looking for wild herbs, especially Huangjing root. I'd spotted some on my way back. On my return trip, I passed Wang Chongqing beating his wife in the field. Not my business. I had an idea. The local wine was weak and sour, basically worthless. Using jars and bottles I'd bought earlier, I built a simple still, redistilled the wine to raise the alcohol content, then mixed in deer blood and huangjing root. I tasted it, strong, with a real kick. A health tonic and a stiff drink in one. Rich men in the county would pay well for this. Another way to make money. I butchered the deer carefully, keeping the sinew, skin, and organs. I hung 30 pounds of meat for our own use and prepared the rest, nearly 200 pounds, plus the antlers and several jars of my new medicinal wine to sell in the county. But I had a problem: how to transport all of it. The only option was an ox cart, and the only person in the village with one was Wang Chongsheng, the man I'd just insulted that morning. He was the biggest cheapskate in the village, a man who charged his workers for everything. I swallowed my pride, grabbed 100 coins, and went to his house. It was the nicest place in the village, proper brick walls and tiled roof, generations of wealth behind it. At the gate, I spotted his brother, Wang Chongshuan, lurking and peeping inside like a creep, hands busy below his waist. Disgusting. He scurried away when he saw me. The steward Wang sent open the door. When I mentioned borrowing the ox cart, his face dropped instantly. He started listing fees, feed costs, wear and tear, the ox sweating. I cut him off with 20 coins. He hesitated, then made excuses about the master not being home. A woman's voice came from inside, overruling him. It was the wife. She said she was in charge and told him to arrange it. Wang's wife opened the door in a floral dress, hair still wet, bruises visible on her neck from where her husband had hit her earlier. When she saw me, her eyes lit up. She pulled me inside and shut the door. She got straight to the point. Her husband couldn't perform anymore, and she wanted me to get her pregnant. She'd let me use the ox cart for free and help me with anything I needed in the future. She started sliding her dress off her shoulders. I had zero interest. She wasn't attractive to me, and she reeked of cheap perfume. But I noticed a peephole in the wall, and a plan formed instantly. I told her I had a special preference. I liked to wash up first, and I wanted her blindfolded. She bought it completely, giggled, and went to the back room to wait. On my way out, I ran into Wang Chongshuan, the chief's creepy brother who'd been lurking outside earlier. I pulled him aside and told him there was a willing woman waiting inside, blindfolded and ready. He nearly fell over thanking me. I shushed him, pointed him to the room, and he rushed in. I heard them get started, smiled to myself, took the ox cart from the steward, and left. If they got caught, so what? It was all Wang family blood anyway. And once something like that happens between two people, it never stops at once. I loaded up everything and headed for the county town. I hired a local boy to guide me around. I sold the deer meat to the biggest restaurant and brought the antlers and deer blood wine to a medicine shop. I made over 40 taels of silver. A passing merchant bought the remaining scraps at a high price, bringing my total to over 60 taels. I was stunned. One deer was worth enough to buy a house in town. I went straight to the grain shop and bought 50 measures of mixed rice. Then I found a blacksmith and bought a proper spear, plus saws, hammers, and other tools. The cart filled up fast. Near the county office, I noticed a commotion. Wounded soldiers were lined up, collecting their disability payments. Among them I spotted a one-eyed man with a broken leg on crutches, with Xiaowang, my wife's older brother. He'd only been gone 4 months, and had come back completely destroyed. Even for someone like me who'd seen plenty of blood, it hit hard. War chews up ordinary people and spits them out. It also reminded me that the front lines were getting closer. I needed to prepare faster. I stopped at the livestock market last. The government had made it legal to buy and sell cattle, though they kept beef prices low to discourage slaughter. I paid 15 taels for a scrawny ox, enough money for a normal family to live on for years. Then I bought a batch of chicks and a brand new ox cart. The merchant threw in free feed, probably because he hadn't seen a customer spend like that in ages. I drove through the night to get home. Next morning, when the sisters saw the chicks and the ox, they lost it. They threw their arms around me and kissed me on the spot. In this starving world, chickens and a cow meant a future. Wanqing immediately went to cut grass for the ox. Wanqing got busy building a little home for the chicks. I returned Wang Chongqing's ox cart. His wife glared at me like she wanted me dead. She'd figured out it wasn't me in that room with her. Not my problem. A couple days later, everything at home was in order. I loaded up my new ox cart with deer blood wine, 50 pounds of grain, rabbits and pheasants from my traps, and headed to the county with both sisters. I handed Wanqing a pouch with 2 taels of silver and told her it was a gift for her parents. She looked at me with tears in her bloodshot eyes, feeling the warmth of the new clothes I'd bought her. Then she suddenly said she and her sister wanted to give me children. I teased them about how many, 8? 10. Start right now? To my surprise, Wanqing said yes, right now. So we stopped the cart in the countryside and spent some time together in the grass by the roadside. After that, the sisters were in much better spirits for the rest of the trip. Their family lived on the edge of the county in a modest mud brick house. Their father, Lin Feng, used to be a respected doctor with a proper stone courtyard home and farmland. But after he got too old to work, he sold his clinic. Then the sisters couldn't find husbands in time, so the government piled on extra taxes. He sold his land, then the big house, until all that was left was this little place. He'd even given away his last savings as dowry for the sisters, hoping to protect them from the old me. Their mother came to the gate and burst into tears when she saw her daughters. The sisters dropped to their knees and cried. I tied up the ox and went inside. Their second brother, Xiaowang, was in the yard, one leg gone, one eye missing, sunbathing in a bamboo chair while the old man treated his wounds. He was only gone 4 months and came back a wreck. I started unloading the cart, grain, wine, meat, everything, and stacking it in their yard. The old man watched with growing panic. He thought I was returning the dowry, which meant I was divorcing his daughters. In this world, a divorced woman could never remarry, and a family with unmarried daughters past the age limit faced exile. His hands were shaking. He started nervously telling me he'd help me with anything I needed. Just please keep his girls. I was confused for a moment. I'd come here to show respect, not return anyone. Then the sisters realized what was happening and rushed over with the silver. Father, mother, this money is from our husband, to show his respect to you both. The sisters jumped in and explained everything to their father, how I'd been hunting, earning money, buying supplies for winter. They bragged about me nonstop, building me up as the perfect husband. The old man's face went from terror to disbelief. He looked at his daughters in their new clothes, healthy and well-fed, then ran outside and saw the ox and cart. His hands trembled. In this empire, owning a cow made you wealthy. He came back with tears in his eyes, grabbed my hands, and called me a good son-in-law over and over. He said he'd been wrong about me. He ordered his wife to cook some dishes and insisted on drinking with me. I brought out my deer blood wine and warned him it was strong. He scoffed at the warning, grabbed his bowl, and downed it in one gulp. His face turned red instantly. He started coughing like his throat was on fire, calling for water. I just smiled. I tried to tell him. The alcohol in my wine was over 40%, made with modern distillation methods. The local rice wine was maybe 5% at best. Nobody in this era had ever tasted anything close. Once he recovered, he got curious. He asked how I made it. When I mentioned the medicinal properties, how strong alcohol kills germs and cleans wounds, his eyes went wide. He was a lifelong doctor, and he immediately understood the implications. Then he got excited and declared that his medical knowledge finally had an heir. He'd been worried nobody would carry on his skills. After dinner, the family talked. Their mother fussed about the sisters not being pregnant yet. I asked the second brother about the war situation. He told me it was bad. The northern barbarians had reached the border of our province. Spies were already planted everywhere, and if things didn't improve by spring, everyone would need to flee south. That worried me. I was running low on silver and didn't have enough resources to build real defenses. Running south wasn't safe either. Then an idea hit me, the gambling house. I could make money there. I filed that away for later. Before bed, I arranged for my ox to be fed. Back home, I'd left Tian Lao Ba guarding the house. In these desperate times, if nobody watched your things, people would steal the straw off your roof. The old man, fired up by the deer blood wine, dragged his wife to their bedroom early. The sisters giggled watching their parents. Then both of them, flushed from the wine themselves, grabbed my hands and pulled me toward our room, begging me to hurry. Next morning we visited the county town, then headed home after lunch. As we entered the village, something was wrong. Every villager was rushing toward the fields carrying tools and sticks. Wild boars had come down from the mountain, 8 of them, led by a massive beast that weighed at least 500 pounds. They were tearing through the riverside vegetable fields. These were the best farmland in the village, and almost all of it belonged to village chief Wang Changshan. The vegetables were supposed to be sold to city restaurants before winter. His whole income was being eaten alive. It made sense why the boars came. Villagers had been stripping the mountain bare of wild fruit and roots out of desperation, leaving nothing for the animals. So the boars came down to eat the crops instead. Wang Changshan was screaming at his workers to charge in and kill them. Nobody moved. 3 young men had already tried and gotten badly hurt. The Boar King sent them flying with 1 hit. These people had no real weapons and no strength. Going in meant death. When I showed up, everyone lit up. The village women were staring at me with hearts in their eyes. After the civet and the deer, they'd turned me into some kind of legend. Wang Changshan immediately tried blaming me, said my hunting drove the animals down and I owed him for the damages. I stepped aside and let him trip face first into the muddy field. I told him that was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard, and if that was his attitude, I'd just wait until the boars finished eating. His loss, not mine. He dragged himself up, covered in black mud, and started begging. I laid out my terms. Every villager who helped would get 30 coins, paid by him. Anyone injured gets an extra 10, and all the boar meat goes to me. He refused at first, furious. He grabbed a stick and charged at the Boar King himself. The stick snapped on impact. The boar flipped him into the air, then charged and gored his back with its tusks. Blood everywhere. He barely crawled back alive. After that, he agreed to everything. Every condition. I pulled my spear from the ground and addressed the crowd. Wang Changshan was paying 30 coins per person. I'd lead the hunt, and everyone follows my orders exactly. The meat was mine, but I'd share some with everyone who helped. I asked who was willing. Wang Changshan's workers were all happy to help. They'd been squeezed by him for years, and my reputation for keeping promises was already solid. Ever since Tian Laoba started working for me and eating regular meals with meat, everyone in the village wanted the same deal. They gathered around me like soldiers ready for orders. I laid out the plan. Wild boars are too tough for a direct attack. Thick skin, heavy muscle. No normal weapon can pierce them easily. We'd split into 3 groups. Tian Laoba and Wang San would each lead a team to provoke the boars, lure them toward the trees, and trick them into charging into rocks and trunks. Once they were dazed and exhausted, the teams would smash their heads with stones. I'd handle the killing blows with my bow. First, I dealt with the Boar King myself. At close range, my arrow punched straight into its forehead and sank deep into the skull. The beast charged at me with the arrow still sticking out of its head, tusks gleaming. But it only made it a few steps before crashing face first into the mud, barely breathing. After that, the teams worked perfectly. They drove the remaining boars in circles, wearing them down. Whenever one stumbled, I put an arrow through it. Before long, all 8 boars were down. The villagers couldn't believe it. While everyone was celebrating, Wang Changshan, the chief's worthless brother, walked up and demanded half the meat. He reminded me about the favor I'd done him with his brother's wife and hinted he'd expose me if I didn't share. I almost laughed. He was the one who slept with his own sister-in-law. That had nothing to do with me. When I refused, he actually swung his fist at my face. Bad move. I caught his wrist and crushed it, bones cracking loud enough for everyone to hear. Then I slammed his shoulder out of its socket. He dropped to his knees screaming. To make sure everyone got the message, I threw my spear spinning into the air, caught it, and launched it between his legs. The blade stopped a hair's width from his manhood. He fainted on the spot. I slapped him awake, then walked over to start butchering the boars. The fight, the spear throw, the whole display, it wasn't really about him. I wanted every person in this village to see clearly who I was. I wanted them to trust my word and fear my strength. The wild boar meat was valuable, sure, but building authority and loyalty was worth more than any amount of pork. I didn't kill Wang Changshan. No need to start a blood feud with the Wang family yet. The villagers loved what I did, though. They crowded around praising my archery and asking me to teach them. I started dividing the boar meat. Tian Laoba, Wang San, and Yang the Limper each got a whole leg plus 10 extra pounds for leading the charge. Everyone else got 5 pounds of meat and 2 pounds of organs. When I announced this, the men could barely contain themselves. 5 pounds of meat was worth 50 coins, more than most of them had seen in months. And I still kept the vast majority. 8 boars totaled over 2,000 pounds. 1 boar covered everyone's share. The rest was mine. It was calculated generosity. I was buying loyalty, showing fairness, proving I keep my word. It worked. They looked at me like I was their savior. I left Tian Lao Ba and his 2 men to guard the boars while I headed home with the sisters to get the ox cart. But as I approached my gate, I noticed the twig I'd wedged in the door crack was on the ground. Someone had been inside. I told the sisters to hide behind a tree, gripped my axe, and pushed the door open slowly. A blade came swinging at my face from above. I blocked it with the axe, grabbed the attacker's wrist, kicked him, and threw him out. Then another knife came from the side, even stronger. I dodged into the yard, and the gate slammed shut behind me. A man with a long blade stepped out from behind the door, cutting off my escape. 4 more armed men appeared from inside the house. I was surrounded. I recognized them immediately. They were from the gambling house in town, the same place the old Lu Feng owed money. The leader was a one-armed man everyone called Dubai. He'd lost his arm collecting gambling debts years ago and became vicious afterward. He ran the gambling den and tavern for the real boss behind the scenes. He smiled at me and laid it out. The old Lu Feng had promised that if he couldn't pay his debts, his wives would be handed over instead. Dubai wanted the money, the women, and probably to burn my house down on the way out. He was confident because he had numbers. These weren't his only men either. He was too cautious for that. There would be more hiding nearby, but he had no idea what he was dealing with. These thugs could come in dozens, and it wouldn't matter. The moment they stepped into my yard to set their ambush, they were already dead. I smiled and told him to bring out everyone. These few weren't enough. He laughed and called for his 4 best killers, nicknamed the 4 dogs. They never came out unless it was time to leave no survivors. 10 men had me surrounded, but I'd already mapped out my attack before they even moved. I exploded forward and reached Dubai in a single breath. He tried to block with his knife, but my axe cut clean through his only remaining hand. Before he could even scream properly, I flipped the axe and took off half his face. The rest came at me fast. One swung his blade. I spun and opened his throat with a single stroke. 2 more charged together. I dodged the first sword, and in the same motion chopped off the other man's arm. Blood sprayed everywhere. Another got a kick that sent him flying. I grabbed a wooden rack and threw it to create space, then dove back in. Within moments, all 10 were dead. Body parts and blood covered the yard. I wiped my axe clean on Dubai's corpse and noticed the blade was getting dull. The iron quality in this era was terrible. Someday, I'd need to build a proper steel furnace. I opened the gate and waved the sisters in. They were shaken. They'd watched the whole thing. 10 armed killers, professional fighters from the gambling den, and I'd torn through them like paper. They started looking at me differently. Wanqing asked if I was secretly some legendary warrior who'd gotten tired of killing and hidden myself in this village. Wanqing wondered if I was a retired assassin, like characters from storybooks. I just wiped the blood off my face, smiled, and told them not to ask. They came up with their own explanation. I must have been hiding my true strength all along, and only revealed it now because I wanted to give them a better life. I let them believe whatever they wanted. I stacked the bodies in a hidden spot to deal with later, cleaned up the worst of the mess in the yard, then hitched the ox cart, and went to collect the wild boar meat with Tian Lao Ba and his men. We worked until past midnight processing everything. When we finished, I gave each of them a small jar of deer blood wine and some grain. They tried to refuse, said I'd already done enough for them. I had to practically force them to accept. While we worked, I pumped them for information about the village, which young men were reliable, which women were capable and trustworthy. They thought I was just looking for help building my house and eagerly recommended people. I memorized every name. I was building something bigger than a house. After loading all the processed boar meat onto the cart, I brought out something I'd had custom made at the blacksmith in the county, a strange device with a bow mechanism mounted on a wooden stock, with a groove for holding an arrow. A crossbow. Wanqing stared at it, completely confused. She'd seen me pick it up at the blacksmith, but assumed it was a part for the ox cart. Wanqing had no idea what the device was. She thought it was a cart part. I strung it with dried deer sinew and calibrated it under the lamplight. I told her it was called a crossbow, a devastating weapon. The blacksmith who made it had never seen anything like the design I'd drawn. That meant either this empire didn't know about crossbows, or the government had banned them completely. Either way, it could be a huge business opportunity later. But for now, it was for hunting and self-defense. I'd also made 2 smaller crossbows for the sisters, but there was no time to show them tonight. When I told them I was going out, they panicked. Wan Xin grabbed my arm and begged me not to go to the brothel. She even offered to go learn new techniques from the girls there if that would keep me home. I almost laughed. These 2 would be the death of me. I explained the real reason. I'd just killed 10 of the gambling house's fighters. Their boss would already know something was wrong. If I didn't finish this tonight, they'd come after us again and again. I kissed them both and promised to be back by sunrise. I drove the ox cart through the night and reached town an hour later. The Hanyuan gambling house was the biggest in town. Fancy building, gold decorations, impossible to miss. I didn't go through the front door. I climbed onto the roof, lifted some tiles, and studied the layout from above. This wasn't just about killing. I was watching where the money went. With war coming, silver was everything. I was planning a big score. The gambling house had about 30 armed guards who lived there full-time, paid and housed. The boss, a fat man named Lee with a round belly, finally showed up late at night, surrounded by bodyguards. His head enforcer, Yang III, nicknamed Three Master, a man with 9 fingers, rushed over and whispered to him. He was reporting that Dubai's team hadn't returned. The boss started cursing about how useless his men were, failing to handle one Lu Feng. I smiled from the rooftop, my heavy crossbow already loaded and aimed at his thick neck. But I didn't fire yet. Three Master was a battlefield veteran, tough and dangerous. I wasn't afraid of him, but rushing in against 30 men with a capable fighter among them wasn't smart. I waited for the perfect moment. I released the crossbow bolt. It cut through the night air and punched straight through Boss Lee's neck. He grabbed at the wound, trying to scream, but nothing came out. Blood poured between his fingers as he collapsed. In his last moment, he saw my shadow on the rooftop. Three Master dove under a table. Smart, but my crossbow punched right through the wood and into his shoulder. He'd never seen a weapon that could do that. He pulled the bolt out, decided his boss was dead and loyalty no longer mattered, and tried to escape through a window. I dropped down from the roof before he could move. He spun and slashed upward with his knife, but he was too slow. My blade took his arm off, then opened his throat. He hit the floor knowing exactly who killed him. The gambling hall erupted into chaos. Gamblers started grabbing silver off the tables, fighting each other. Nobody noticed me slip in through the confusion. I moved through the crowd like a dancer, and every time I passed a guard, he dropped. I killed over a dozen before anyone even reacted. The last real threat was a fighter they called Big Head, the third-ranked man in the operation. He used iron knuckle guards and fought dirty, grabbing a bystander as a human shield when I swung at him. His counterpunch nearly caught my gut. He was fast and clever, but not fast enough. I dodged his fist, faked with a kick, and while he was off balance, drove my blade clean through his stomach. He asked who I was as he died. I told him he shouldn't have come after me. The remaining guards saw their 3 best fighters dead and lost all will to fight. They screamed about demons and tried to run. None of them made it out. One wounded man crawled toward the exit in the darkness. I picked him off with the crossbow from the shadows. After clearing the place, I found the money stores and loaded everything onto my ox cart. Then I set the building on fire. The liquor storage caught, and the whole place went up in explosions, one after another. The gambling house and the connected tavern burned to ash. By morning, I was casually driving my ox cart into the town market like any other merchant. Behind me, county officials were picking through the smoldering ruins, pulling out charred bodies. Among the investigators was Wood Xiaowang's brother, Wood Xiaoyang, my wife's eldest brother, a minor officer from the county office. He'd been sent to investigate the fire. He had no idea who was responsible. I drove my cart right past the crime scene without breaking a sweat. Wood Xiaoyang spotted me and waved. I smiled and pointed at my load of pork, heading to market. He gave me a thumbs up. He already knew I'd visited his family and brought gifts. He had no idea I was the one who'd burned that building down hours ago. Selling over 1,000 pounds of boar meat took most of the morning. The market couldn't absorb it all, so I drove from restaurant to restaurant across town until everything was gone. Total earnings, 107 taels of silver. I loaded the cart with grain and supplies for the trip home. But the real treasure was hidden underneath the cart, silver, bank notes, and a little gold, all taken from the gambling house vault before I torched the place. When I got home, I could see two thin figures standing on the hill outside our yard, staring down the road. They'd been waiting all night. When they saw me come around the bend, relief flooded their faces and their eyes filled with tears. Inside, I showed them what I'd brought back. When Wan Qing saw the bank notes, she started crying, not from happiness, but from worry. She begged me never to leave them alone at night again. Wan Qing said the same. They didn't care about the money. They just wanted me safe. They'd rather live poor than have me risk my life. I promised them the gambling house was finished and I wouldn't need to go out at night anymore. That calmed them down. I asked Wan Qing about the old pawn tickets. The previous Lu Feng had pawned everything, the land deed, valuables, even the sister's dowry, to fund his drinking and gambling. Wan Qing had quietly saved those tickets, burying them under a stone slab in the yard. She dug them up and handed me the crumpled, damp papers. 3 acres of farmland, pawned for just 3 taels. I felt a strange ache, maybe leftover emotion from the original body's memories. I told them I'd redeem the land soon. I told them someday I'd buy the whole village and make them landowners. Wan Qing's eyes went wide with disbelief. Wan Qing said she didn't need any of that. Just a peaceful life was enough. Then we counted everything together. Banknotes, about 1,000 taels. Silver, over 600. Plus loose coins and small pieces of gold. Total, more than 2,000 taels. The sisters couldn't believe it. That was more cash than the village chief's entire fortune. I stood looking at the center of the village, the flattest, best-positioned spot. That's where I'd build. First step, a brick kiln. I'd seen plenty of them during my years as a mercenary in the wilderness. I knew how to build one. All I needed was labor, and the village had plenty of that. After lunch, I sat on a big rock in the yard and planned everything out. The exhaustion from the past few days caught up with me, and I fell asleep in the afternoon. When I woke up, it was dark, and both my wives were lying right beside me. Everything else could wait. By the time I woke again the next morning, they'd already prepared hot water and breakfast. While I was getting ready in the morning, Wan Qing dropped a bombshell. She told her sister they should find me a concubine. At first I thought it was about our nights together. They couldn't keep up with me. But Wan Qing explained the real reason. We'd been together for a while now, and neither sister was pregnant. Under Yuzhou law, a man without children could have his property seized and be forced into the army. If I got taken away, they'd have nothing. So having more women meant more chances for an heir, and also help around the house. They even knelt before me and begged. Wan Qing said she already had someone picked out, a childhood friend from the county who was educated, capable, and still unmarried because she was too proud to accept an ordinary man. Her family was being punished by the government for her refusal to marry. I tried to wave it off, told them not to worry about children or conscription, but they wouldn't budge. Wan Qing was dead serious. I could see she'd thought this through carefully. She was protecting our family from every angle. She was already shaping up to be the perfect head wife. I gave in and let her write the letter. When I stepped outside, 4 teenage boys from the village were standing nervously by my gate with bags of gifts. They wanted me to teach them hunting. Their families had sent their most precious belongings as tuition gifts. I looked them over. Wang Dian, Zhang Hongda, and Li Long were the ones Tian Lao Ba had recommended, honest, hardworking types. The 4th, Wang Fei, was skinny but quick on his feet. I'd noticed him during the boar hunt. But his gift was the cheapest of the 4. He was the calculating type, always looking for the best deal with the least effort. I accepted the gifts. Refusing would have been an insult, but told them I didn't need them to bow or call me master. I gave them bows I'd made from extra wood Tian Lao Ba had brought me, along with some traps. My terms, everything they caught, they give me a third. If they kept this up through winter until spring, the tools would be theirs to keep and the tribute rule would end. Li Long, the sharpest of the 4, immediately understood. It was basically a free deal. They'd been scavenging the mountains every winter anyway. This just gave them proper tools. One thing I would never share was the crossbow. That was my secret advantage. The bows were simple enough that any village craftsman could copy them, but the crossbow's power and accuracy were on a completely different level. If that technology leaked out, I'd lose my edge. I gave the 4 boys their bows and arrows. I deliberately gave the weakest one to Wang Fei since I didn't fully trust him. None of the arrows had iron tips, good enough for rabbits and pheasants, nothing more. I wanted to warn them about the dangers, but they were so excited they ran off before I could finish talking. While Wan Qing was sorting through their gifts, she held up something round and covered in dirt. She didn't recognize it and worried it might be poisonous. The Xiaofeng incident was still fresh in her mind. I took one look and my heart nearly jumped out of my chest. It was a sweet potato. In my previous life, I knew the history. A merchant had smuggled sweet potatoes into the country at great personal risk, and once they were cultivated widely, famines virtually disappeared. The crop grows fast, produces huge yields, and one potato can replace a whole meal. If I could grow these, it would change everything. I frantically asked Wan Qing to check the bag for more. She found a second one at the bottom, smaller, and already starting to sprout. Perfect for planting. I told her to store it carefully somewhere warm, since sweet potatoes can't survive freezing temperatures. The smooth one without sprouts, I told her to steam for dinner. She looked skeptical that this ugly lump could taste good. I teased her that nothing could taste as good as she and her sister. She blushed and hit my chest with her little fists. One thing led to another, and I carried her to the bedroom. When Wan Qing finished writing her letter and found us, she tried to look away, but I pulled her in too. I didn't wake up until late afternoon, the first time I'd actually felt tired. The sisters got up even later, still flushed, hair messy, legs wobbly, and started making dinner. When the steamed sweet potato came out, Wan Qing took a tiny bite, and her eyes went wide. She'd never tasted anything so soft and sweet in her life. Wan Qing tried it next, and practically screamed with delight. I gave them my share too, and just drank rice porridge. They tried to refuse, but I glared them into eating it. After dinner, I planned to walk around the village and start buying up land from families who'd pawned their deeds. Most people had sold their plots out of desperation, and the tickets were worthless to them since they'd never have the money to redeem them. I could buy those tickets cheaply and reclaim the land myself. But as soon as I stepped outside, the 4 boys came stumbling toward me. They were all injured, cuts and bruises everywhere. The worst one was being carried, his face torn open and his chest ripped apart, barely alive. One look told me everything. These idiots had gone after a large predator with those flimsy bows I'd given them. Those weapons could barely kill a civet, let alone anything bigger. I told them they were only good for rabbits and small birds. They hadn't listened, and now one of them was dying. The boys came stumbling in, terrified, talking over each other about some monster that could stand up like a mountain. From their description, I knew immediately it was a bear. Bears have skin so thick, even a rifle needs to hit the heart to kill one. Their wooden arrows were useless. I asked who led them into the deep forest. Wang Fei, of course. The reckless one. I looked at Wang Fei. He was already gone. Chest ripped open, face destroyed. No saving him. I told them to bury him and gave the other 360 coins to see a doctor in the next village. They were stunned by the generosity. Working for Wang Changsheng, they'd never gotten help when injured. Here I was paying for wounds they'd caused themselves. They warned me the bear was near the forest's edge, close to the village. That was a real problem. I couldn't have a bear wandering near my home where my wives could get hurt. I also asked about the sweet potato. Who brought it? Zhang Hongdao said it was Wang Fei's contribution. Ironic. The most careless boy brought the most valuable gift. I asked where he'd dug it up and got the general location. Next morning, I headed into the mountains following their directions. I searched the river valley for the bear, but found only droppings and tracks. No bear. It had apparently moved on. I kept searching to be sure, then decided to explore beyond the next ridge. That's when things got interesting. Past the mountain, in another valley, I found a dead horse. Not a wild horse. This one had iron horseshoes and a bridle. Its belly had been torn open by something massive, organs mostly eaten, flesh partially gnawed. Probably the bear's work. But why had it only eaten part? I climbed a boulder to get a better view. Below it lay a dead man. His clothing immediately caught my attention, a sheepskin vest, cowhide boots. This wasn't a person from our empire. This was the clothing of the northern barbarians, made from animal hides because the grasslands had few other resources. It hit me. Would Xiaowang had warned me that barbarian scouts were already infiltrating deep into our province. This dead man was almost certainly one of them. A northern spy on horseback who'd run into the bear and lost. The war was closer than I thought. The barbarians were already scouting our territory, and Yuzhou, with its relative wealth, was exactly the kind of prize they'd come for. The dead barbarians' wounds were from animal claws, but the actual cause of death was probably being thrown from his horse and hitting the rocks. I confirmed there was definitely a large predator in this area. Looking closer at the ground, I noticed multiple sets of hoof prints, not just one horse. There were more of them. I followed the tracks upstream to the river's source. I found it, a cliff face with water flowing from a crack, forming a deep pool below. Hidden near a dark cave entrance, a jet-black horse was tied up, fully equipped with a leather saddle, a curved sword, and a quiver of arrows. Barbarian gear. Whoever owned this horse was still alive. I set up my crossbow in position and waited. Eventually, a short man in leather armor emerged from the cave. He checked his surroundings carefully, ate some dried mutton by the pool, then went back inside. When he came out again, he was carrying a corpse on his shoulders. That's when I understood his mission. He wasn't here for the water. He was here to poison it. Dumping diseased corpses into this pool would contaminate every river and stream downstream. Villages, towns, everyone who drank the water would get sick. Mass murder disguised as nature. I fired my crossbow. But these barbarian scouts trained from childhood in mounted archery. He heard the bolt coming and used the corpse as a shield. The bolt punched through the body, but only nicked his neck. He sprinted for his horse where his weapons were stored. My position was exposed. I climbed a tall tree with thick branches and hid in the canopy. The barbarian came riding past on horseback, bow drawn, body pressed flat against the horse's side to minimize his target. Classic nomad cavalry technique. But he'd overlooked one thing. The forest was too dense for mounted combat. And I was above him now. I grabbed a branch with one hand, swung down with the crossbow in the other, and kicked him square in the neck mid-swing. He flew off the horse. He was tough, though. Even after that hit, he managed to pull his curved sword while rolling on the ground. He dodged my spear thrust, blocked another, and tried to run for the horse again. I threw my axe at him. He ducked, but I'd already predicted that. I never intended to kill him with it. If I'd wanted him dead, I could have shot him from the tree. I wanted him alive. The government paid bounties for captured barbarian spies, and a living prisoner could provide intelligence that would save countless lives downstream. The spinning axe handle cracked the barbarian right on the skull. He dropped like a stone. I tied him up tight, then turned my attention to the real prize, the horse. It was a magnificent animal, jet black, tall and strong, fully equipped with saddle, sword, and quiver. The horse didn't like me at first, rearing and snorting. I grabbed the reins and yanked hard enough to force its head down, then pulled it right off its feet. When it stood back up and met my eyes, it got the message fast. I dangled my axe near its belly and explained the situation. Behave and eat well, maybe even get a mate someday. Cause trouble and lose something important. The horse understood perfectly. I ate the barbarian's dried meat, loaded him onto the horse, and headed home. On the way down, I found the patch of sweet potatoes Wang Fei had dug from, a whole field of them. I loaded as many as I could onto the horse alongside the prisoner. The poor animal was panting under the weight, but didn't dare complain with that axe swinging beneath it. The barbarian woke up halfway and started cursing, demanding I release him. I asked him how many scouts had come and what other missions they had besides poisoning the water. He refused to talk. I punched him unconscious again. When I emerged from the forest, Wang Changsheng was in the fields below with his workers, repairing the damage from the wild boar attack. The workers spotted me first, a man leading a horse with a bound prisoner on its back. Word spread instantly. When they recognized the prisoner's sheepskin boots as barbarian clothing, they couldn't believe it. Capturing a northern spy alive was a major achievement with a serious government bounty attached. Wang Changsheng heard his workers praising me and lost his temper. He stormed over and blocked my path, red-faced, calling me the village's curse. He laid into me with a list of accusations. My parents died because of me. The famine was my fault. My hunting drove the wild boars down to destroy his fields. I'd caused Wang Fei's death by giving the boys weapons. And worst of all, I'd tricked his brother into sleeping with his wife, bringing shame on the Wang family. That last one was actually true, though his brother hadn't exactly needed much convincing. I just stood there smiling, letting him rant, waiting to see where this performance was going. Wang Changxing kept screaming, calling me a curse on the village, blaming me for everything. The famine, the wild boars, Wang Fei's death, his brother's affair. He pointed at my nose and called me an animal. Then he declared he was using his authority as village chief to banish me from the village forever. I almost laughed. I asked if he was offering me his position. That made him even crazier. He convinced himself that my entire plan all along was to steal his role as chief, that I'd deliberately arranged for his brother to sleep with his wife, to destroy the Wang family's reputation. When I lost patience and shoved him into the muddy field, he scrambled away screaming about murder, tripping and falling the whole way. Walking home, I realized these two brothers were a real threat. Not to me directly, but to my wives. I'd be leaving for the county to turn in the barbarian prisoners soon, and Wang Changxing and his brother were exactly the type to try something while I was gone. I needed to tell Tian Lao Ba and the others to watch over my house. Wang Changxing couldn't be killed carelessly since he was still an official. But his brother Wang Changshuan was a different story. One wrong move from him, and I'd end it without hesitation. What I didn't know was that behind me, the two brothers were already plotting. Wang Changshuan laid out a plan to his brother. Wait until I left for the county with the prisoner, then break into my house, assault both sisters, burn the house down with the evidence inside, and use their workers as alibis. Wang Changxing agreed immediately. They wanted revenge for every humiliation, the boar incident, the affair, my rising status. When I got home, Wan Xing was cleaning the yard and Wan Xing was cooking porridge. Helping them was Huang Sanyang, an older woman from the edge of the village. She was a kind soul who'd lost both sons to the army draft and her only daughter to childbirth. She'd secretly cared for my wives back when the old Lu Feng used to beat them so badly they couldn't get out of bed, sneaking them food, nursing them through illness. Wan Xing would have died from her stomach sickness without Huang Sanyang's help. She treated the sisters like her own daughters, and I was happy to have her around. Wan Xing came running to me the moment she saw me, eyes full of warmth. When I got home, the sisters shyly asked if they could give some grain to Huang Sanyang. Her husband had broken his leg falling off a mountain while gathering firewood, and they'd had no food for 2 days. The sisters looked at me with big nervous eyes, in the old days. Asking for anything would have gotten them beaten. I told them it was no big deal. They were my wives. They could make decisions like that on their own. They were so moved they nearly cried again. The fact that they dared to ask at all showed how much they trusted me now. When Huang Sanyang saw the barbarian tied to the horse, she screamed and tried to drag the sisters away. I calmed her down and explained about the 50-tael bounty from the county government. Then she noticed the horse and got serious. She warned me that keeping a military horse was punishable by death. I told her I'd say it was a wild horse I tamed in the mountains. She thought for a moment, then offered to hide the saddle, bridle, and all the military gear at her house. Without that evidence, nobody could prove it was a war horse. I understood what she was really doing. By holding evidence that could incriminate me, she was binding herself to our family, proving she'd never betray us, while also keeping a card to protect the sisters if I ever turned bad again. It was actually clever. Wan Xing figured it out too. I didn't mind. This old woman genuinely loved my wives like daughters, so I agreed. I hid the horse in the backyard near the mountain where nobody would find it, stored the sweet potatoes safely, and tied up the prisoner for the night. I'd take him to the county tomorrow. Over dinner, boiled boar meat and wild vegetable porridge, I couldn't stop staring at my wives. They caught me looking and turned red, trying to hide behind their bowls. I told them to eat plenty because they'd need the energy tonight. I had them boil a big pot of hot water afterward. They didn't understand why. I told them it was bath time, and tonight I'd be teaching them some new things. The only tub we had was an oversized wooden barrel I'd commissioned for skinning animals, but it worked. Watching them squeeze into it together, I made a mental note to order a proper bathtub big enough for 3. When Wan Xing stepped out of the bedroom doorway, freshly washed, holding her clothes in front of herself, and said softly, "Husband, I'm ready." Well, everything else could wait until tomorrow. We had a very good night. I taught the sisters some new things they'd never heard of before. Wan Xing was shy at first, but followed my lead. By the end, both of them were completely spent. Before dawn, I loaded the barbarian prisoner onto the ox cart and headed for the county. I told Wan Xing to have Huang Sanyang come stay with them while I was gone. I'd wanted Tian Lao Ba to guard the house, but the sisters refused. They said having another man watch over them while their husband was away wasn't proper. So the old woman was the best choice. On the road, the barbarian pretended to still be unconscious, waiting for a chance to attack, when the cart turned. I broke his arm for trying. No more tricks after that. At the city gate, things got tense. The guards saw the barbarian and surrounded me instantly, weapons drawn. Once I explained myself, they escorted me straight to the county office. My brother-in-law Wood Xiaoyang met me there, impressed. He walked me through the process. The prison warden would take the prisoner and give me paperwork. Then I'd collect the bounty from the county treasurer. He joked that my reward was more than his salary for 2 or 3 years. I flattered him, telling him he was a skilled fighter too. He ate it up. He was a simple, good-hearted guy. Then the warden came out. Chen Jianyu was enormous, taller than me by a full head, twice my width, all muscle. He'd been a butcher before the army drafted him. On the battlefield, he'd fought like a madman, killed dozens of enemies, and nearly died from his wounds. When he survived, they made him the county's head jailer. He was the strongest fighter in the entire county. He lifted the barbarian off the ground with one hand, like picking up a chicken. Confirmed it was a real northern spy. Then he turned on me with a hard stare and asked if I knew that collaborating with the enemy was punishable by death in Yuzhou, slow execution by 1,000 cuts. He was testing me, trying to see if I'd crack. My brother-in-law started sweating, terrified I'd get us both in trouble. But I met Chin's eyes without flinching and asked him straight. Did he think I couldn't have captured the spy myself, or was he accusing me of treason? Wood Xiaoyang nearly fainted. But Chen Jianyu didn't get angry. Instead, he stared at me with a look of surprise, almost respect. Chen Jianyu was intrigued, but still skeptical. He said he'd believe I captured the spy only if I could beat his head constable in a fight. No proof of skill, no reward money. I laughed inside. Did he really think I came here for 50 taels? I had over 2,000 at home. I told him straight, keep the money. I brought the spy so they could interrogate him and get useful intelligence to protect people. I wasn't going to perform like a circus animal for pocket change. That threw him off completely. He'd expected me to beg. A poor villager turning down that kind of silver made no sense to him. He suspected I was playing mind games. He called in his constable anyway, a medium-built man with a scar between his eyebrows and a swagger in his step. The constable grabbed a heavy wooden rod, the kind they use to beat confessions out of prisoners, and flicked one at me without warning. I caught it with one hand. That surprised him. The throw had real force behind it. Chen whispered to his constable, "Don't hold back, just don't kill him." We circled each other. I took a proper staff fighting stance, front hand pressing down, back hand raised. Chen noticed immediately and narrowed his eyes. He recognized trained technique. The constable attacked first, swinging hard. I sidestepped and blocked. He was decent, switched from staff work to spear-style thrusting, then a sudden reverse strike. It caught me slightly off guard, but the technique change cost him power. I didn't even bother dodging, just drove my rod straight into his weapon. His staff bounced back and hit him in the face. I followed with one clean strike. He dropped unconscious. The other officers backed away from me. The whole fight lasted seconds. Chen stood up, eyes bright. He admitted he'd misjudged me and said he needed someone like me on his team. He offered me a position at the county office on the spot. My brother-in-law nearly tripped over himself rushing to convince me. He said this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Government salary, free food and housing, iron rice bowl. His own father had paid a fortune and pulled connections just to get him his low-level position. I turned it down flat. A constable's salary was nothing compared to what I was earning hunting. Even if he offered me Chen's own position, I'd have to think hard about it. I had 2 beautiful wives at home, land to develop, a business to build. Why would I trade that for taking orders from bureaucrats? Chen's face went red. Nobody had ever refused his personal recruitment offer. Wood Xiaoyang panicked, apologizing on my behalf, begging me to reconsider. My brother-in-law kept pushing me to accept Chen's offer, even kicked me out of frustration. He meant well, worried about his sisters living in a mountain village forever. But I'd made up my mind. A government salary couldn't compare to what I was building at home. Then a clerk whispered to Chen that the county magistrate's nephew was coming to fill that exact position. Chen cursed about it, but had to play politics. He signed my reward papers and let me go. I made a mental note about Chen. A man like him, strong and honorable, could be useful someday if I rose high enough. I collected the 50 taels and rushed home. At the crossroads, I found Tian Laoba waiting, looking panicked. He said something terrible had happened at home. All 3 of my men looked roughed up, dirty, bruised. Yang the limper had scrapes on his face. I sprinted to my gate. The yard was wrecked. Huang Sanyang was on the ground, face bloodied, hair a mess. My two wives were huddled beside her, shaking. One look and I knew exactly what had happened. Wang Changshuan, Tian Laoba explained. They'd been coming to deliver wood when they heard screaming from inside. Wang Changshuan had tried to kidnap the sisters. If Huang Sanyang hadn't thrown herself in the way, shielding them with her own body while he beat her with a stick, he would have taken them. The three men arrived just in time. The sisters threw themselves into my arms, sobbing. I saw the rope burns on their wrists and the cuts on their hands. My rage hit a level I hadn't felt since my mercenary days. Hurting my wives was the same as digging up my ancestors' graves. There was only one outcome now. I gave Tian Laoba 2 taels of silver and told him to take Huang Sanyang to the doctor in the next village immediately. Without her and these 3 men, today would have been a disaster. I owed them everything. I told the sisters to go inside. They didn't need to see what came next. Wang Changshuan was already tied up on the ground, gagged, beaten by Tian Laoba's men. When he saw me, he started squirming like a worm, trying to crawl away. Urine pooled beneath him. I picked up the bloody stick he'd used on Huang Sanyang, the same one I used to mix cattle feed. The first blow cracked his skull open. Blood sprayed everywhere. The second knocked him unconscious, his head looking like a crushed fruit. But I wasn't done. Letting him die that easily wasn't enough. I aimed the stick between his legs and swung with everything I had. Wang Changshuan's scream cut through the entire village when that last blow landed. He writhed on the ground, the gag falling from his mouth. I looked up at the sky, then brought the stick down on his skull one more time. His head split open, but I wasn't finished. I asked him which hand tied the ropes on my wives. I cut it off with my axe. Then the other hand. Then I took his eyes. He'd looked at my women with those. Then both legs. They'd carried him into my yard. By the end, he was nothing recognizable. I left what remained of him by the river at the old crooked tree, arranged so the whole village would see. His severed hands hung from the branches. The body knelt beneath, eyeless, limbless. A message no one could misunderstand. Wang Chongqing rushed over with his workers when he heard. He took one look at his brother and fainted. When they finally revived him, he screamed my name and swore revenge. I didn't care. I went home, cleaned up the yard, and found the sisters sitting calmly on the bed. They'd grown stronger through all of this. Wan Qing was practically unshakable now, and Wan Qing had built up her own tolerance to violence. I pulled out 2 roast chickens I'd bought in town, wrapped in oil paper. Their eyes lit up. They hadn't had roast chicken since they lived with their parents. We ate together with porridge. Afterward, Wan Qing asked quietly if they were a burden to me. I pulled them both close and told them anyone who hurt them was my enemy. Simple as that. What I did to Wang Changshuan wasn't just revenge. It was a warning to every person in this village. Touch my family while I'm away, and this is what happens. Wan Qing asked if I was worried Wang Changsheng might report me to the authorities. I told her not to worry. Nobody could prove I killed his brother. But there was plenty of evidence that Wang Changshuan attacked my wives and beat an old woman. If Wang Changxing reported anything, he'd end up charged with enabling his brother's crimes and lose his position as village chief. He was smart enough to know that. Killing Wang Changshuan wasn't impulse. It was strategy, a warning, and the first move in my plan. Next, I'd start buying up every pond land deed in the village, piece by piece, until the whole of Siwa village belonged to me. Wang Changsheng was still a problem. As village chief, he had influence over the villagers who depended on him for work. If he turned them against me, my plans would stall. Next morning after breakfast, I was doing my exercises in the yard, 400 push-ups minimum, the same brutal routine from my mercenary days. That's when I spotted Wang Dian, Zhang Hongda, and Li Long limping toward my gate again. Injured. Again. These idiots had gone back into the mountains without permission, trying to avenge Wang Fei. They hadn't found the bear, but they'd stumbled onto something else, a white-browed tiger. It was wounded, with what looked like a long knife slash on its body. They tried to fight it, got chased, and barely survived by climbing trees. But they'd found its den. The knife wound confirmed my suspicion. The barbarian scouts must have fought the tiger before I found them. That explained the claw marks on the dead spy and horse. A tiger was incredibly valuable, worth even more than the deer. And if it was badly wounded, this was the perfect time to go after it. But first, I punished the 3 boys. I confiscated their bows. They nearly cried, since those bows had already helped them catch enough rabbits and pheasants to improve their family's meals. I told them they'd get the bows back once they each made 20 proper arrows that passed my inspection. They needed to learn discipline before skill. I headed into the mountains before noon, armed with my crossbow, spear, and axe. I reached the den within an hour. Outside the cave, I found drag marks and blood. The tiger had hauled prey inside. That was unusual. Tigers normally eat where they kill. The only reason to drag food home was cubs. I climbed a tree and listened. Sure enough, soft, low growling. Baby tigers. I gathered dry branches, scraped pine resin off the trees, wrapped it all into a torch, and crept to the cave entrance. The smell of blood turned to rot as I went deeper. At a ledge inside, I looked down into the den. The tiger was lying in the grass below, covered in wounds, stained red. It saw me and tried to snarl, but couldn't even stand. It was finished. I jumped down. The dead horse from before was here too, already rotting. 2 tiny tiger cubs, maybe 3 months old, were tearing at the meat, struggling to chew. An idea hit me immediately. If I raised these cubs, they'd grow into the ultimate guard animals. I remembered reading about a famous general who kept tigers and rode them into battle. The enemy horses would panic at the sight and smell. On a battlefield against northern cavalry, a pair of trained tigers could be devastating. I was actually going to raise tigers. The thought alone made me grin. The mother tiger saw me approaching her cubs and somehow found the strength to stand, even though she was bleeding from everywhere. She roared and stared me down. I raised my crossbow at her forehead, but she collapsed again after just a few seconds. It was pure willpower, nothing more. I lowered my weapon. This tiger had actually done me a favor. She'd killed those 2 barbarian scouts, which led me to the prisoner and the horse. So I decided not to kill her. She was dying anyway. I sat down near her and made her an offer. Her cubs wouldn't survive alone in these mountains. I'd take them and raise them, keep them safe, let them grow strong. In return, after she died naturally, I'd sell her body for money to feed them, but I'd keep her pelt as a sign of respect. Maybe she understood me, maybe she didn't. But she growled once when I asked for agreement, then looked from the dead horse to her cubs. She was worried they'd go hungry. That hit me. Even as a dying beast, her only thought was her children. I sat beside her and waited. About half an hour later, she went still. I respected that she died on her own terms. Then reality set in. This tiger weighed over 400 pounds. I built a drag frame, carved usable meat off the horse carcass, another 200 pounds, and loaded everything up. The cubs were small, maybe 3 months old, still chewing on scraps. They didn't fight when I placed them on the cart. I covered them with big leaves so nobody in the village would see them. It was dark when I got home. The sisters ran out to help me drag everything in. I hadn't mentioned the cubs. When Wanqing pulled back the leaves and found 2 round furry heads staring at her, she screamed and jumped back. Wanqing shrieked too. Then they saw me grinning and realized I'd done it on purpose. Once the shock wore off, Wanqing couldn't resist. She said they were cute. Wanqing told her she wouldn't think so when they were big enough to eat people. But both sisters were fascinated, watching the confused little cubs blink their black eyes. They asked if I was really going to keep them. I said yes. For now, let them roam inside the house. If they misbehaved, hit them. The sisters looked at me like I was insane. Hit tigers? I demonstrated. I grabbed one cub by the scruff. It thrashed and bared its tiny fangs at me. I punched it, not hard enough to injure, but enough to teach. The cub went limp, still growling. I raised my fist again. This time it went completely quiet and docile. Lesson learned. Wanqing snatched the cub from my hands immediately, cradling it against her face, cooing at it. Wanqing grabbed the other one just as fast. Both sisters rushed inside, shielding the cubs from me, whispering comforting words as if I were the dangerous one. Women and their pets, some things never change. The sisters had already adopted the cubs overnight, feeding them horse meat and cuddling them like babies. The little tigers ran to hide behind my wives whenever they saw me, but purred and nuzzled against the sisters like they were their mothers. One touch from me, and both cubs went dead still. Good, they knew the hierarchy. Wanqing suggested we name them. The female had white stripes, so she became Bye-Bye. The male was aggressive and fiery, so he became Hua-Hua. I skinned the mother tiger carefully. Tiger pelts were symbols of status in this era. far too valuable to sell. I'd use it as a blanket. I organized all my loose silver into a chest under the bed and made my plan for the next day. Buy up every pond land deed in the village, then go to the county to sell the tiger meat and bones while redeeming all the land at once. After another night with the sisters, they were getting remarkably skilled. I slept in until the sun hit the window. I spent the morning going house to house collecting pawn tickets. Most families had sold their land at 1 tael per acre years ago and had no hope of getting it back. I offered the same price for their tickets. After visiting about a dozen families, I had over 30 tickets. Most of the land was poor hillside plots, but quantity mattered for now. Walking along the river, I spotted a prime piece of property, over 10 acres of fertile and used land near the water, covered in thick wild grass that proved how rich the soil was. It belonged to a solitary old man in his 80s. Wang Changsheng had been trying to get this land for years without success, waiting for the old man to die so he could seize it. I decided to visit immediately. The old man lived on a small hill behind the village, his yard full of flowers and dried herbs. He was a feng shui master. The whole county came to him for advice on auspicious dates and building orientations. Even people from the county seat visited with gifts. Rumors said he came from a famous divination family and had retired here to escape the world. When I approached his gate, before I even announced myself, the old man spoke without looking up from his tea. Choosing to retire in Siwa village was the best decision of my life. Don't you agree? I froze. He knew I was there. Then he continued. Years ago, I predicted that someone extraordinary would emerge from Yuzhou, someone who would shake the heavens. And now here you are. You're 24 this year, aren't you? He knew my age. He'd sensed me coming. He spoke about fate and destiny as casually as discussing weather. I'd never believed in fortune-telling or mystical seers before, but standing in front of this old man, hearing him describe things he couldn't possibly know, I wasn't so sure anymore. The old man already knew who I was. A widow who brought him meals had mentioned me that morning, and he'd done a divination that told him I'd come today. Before I could even state my business, he pointed to a small ornate box by the door and told me to take everything inside. I opened it and found house deeds, land deeds, over 10 acres of prime riverside property, and a strange silk pouch with something inside. When I tried to open the pouch, he stopped me. He said he'd gotten it years ago and didn't know exactly what it was, only that it could save a life. I must never open it unless I was truly facing death. His only condition, when he died, bury him on the slope behind his house, facing northwest. No name on the gravestone. I promised to care for him and bring him food every day for the rest of his life. He waved me off and went to take a nap. Strange old man. But I had what I needed. I spent the rest of the morning collecting more pawn tickets around the village, then drove to the county in the afternoon with my cart full of tiger meat to sell. On the way, I counted my tickets. Over 40, totaling roughly 100 acres including the old man's prime land. At the pawn shop, the only one in the county, a monopoly operation, I tested the waters with a small ticket first, 7/10 of an acre, originally pawned for 700 coins. The clerk worked his abacus and quoted me 1 tael and 8 coins to redeem it. More than double the original amount, thanks to compound interest. I did the math. Redeeming everything would cost 300 to 500 taels. Robbery, but I had gambling house money to burn. I told him to calculate all of them and slapped the entire stack of tickets on the counter. The clerk's face changed instantly. His boss had standing orders to prevent land redemptions whenever possible. A few small tickets were fine, but returning this much land at once would get him killed. So he made a decision right there. He grabbed the stack and shredded every single ticket before I could stop him. The counter was too high for me to reach across. Then he played innocent. Tickets? What tickets? When did you give me any tickets? He started shouting for help, claiming I was causing trouble. Within seconds, 6 or 7 men with wooden clubs appeared from side passages and surrounded me. I gave the clerk one last chance. Pay up. Hand over the deeds. Everyone walks away happy. He laughed in my face, called me a nobody, and bragged about his boss's connections. Then he ordered his thugs to attack. I pulled my axe, dodged the first swing, and chopped off one man's arm. I grabbed his fallen club, and within seconds had sent 5 or 6 of them flying. Then I walked out the front door and addressed the crowd that had gathered. I played the crowd like an instrument. I told them how the pawn shop had torn up my tickets and tried to kill me just for wanting my land back. I asked if anyone else had been cheated. The dam broke. People started shouting their stories: stolen heirlooms, land deals gone wrong, family treasures sold behind their backs before the redemption period ended. Years of anger poured out. I asked them one question: are we going to keep taking this? Then I planted my staff, vaulted over the counter, and kicked through the barrier. The clerk tried to run. I grabbed him, forced him to tell me where the land deeds were stored, then killed him quietly. He was the only person in the shop who knew my face and name. With him gone, nothing connected me to what happened next. I threw the loose silver from the counter out to the crowd. That was all the invitation they needed. They poured inside like a river breaking through a dam, overwhelming the remaining guards, grabbing everything they could carry. I slipped into the back rooms, found the vault with the land deeds, and took only what I came for. The shop owner came running from the back, cursing. He ran straight into the mob. They trampled him. He didn't get up. When the constables arrived, everyone had scattered. The witnesses all played dumb. Nobody saw anything. Nobody knew anything. The shop staff were either dead or too broken to talk. The authorities sealed the building and started an investigation that would go nowhere. I watched from a tea house across the street, sipping tea until the dust settled. Then I drove my car to the medicine shop to sell the tiger bones. They were too valuable for one small shop to buy entirely. The owner could only afford one bone. He recommended I try selling the rest in Tianyong City, a major trading hub further inland. But that was a long and dangerous journey through bandit territory. He suggested I hire an escort service. There was one reputable outfit in the county called the Dai Escort Agency, well connected along the trade routes. I got a letter of introduction from the pharmacy owner and found the agency's office on the south side of town. They had an established relationship with Tianyong City merchants and knew how to handle the bandits along the way, not through fighting, but through arrangements. No shipment had ever been lost under their protection. The Dai Escort Agency was impressive: big gates, horses, carriages, and dozens of fighters training in the yard. The guards at the door perked up when they saw me. Business had been slow since the border wars cut off the western routes. When I showed them the tiger bones, their eyes went wide. They said this kind of cargo needed to go to Tianyong City to fetch the right price, easily several thousand taels. They led me inside. In the courtyard, a woman was leading combat drills with a spear. She stopped me in my tracks. Tall, athletic, curves that her tight purple outfit did nothing to hide. She moved like water with that spear, fierce eyes, high cheekbones, natural beauty without a drop of makeup. She had an outdoor glow from years on the road instead of the pale softness of noble ladies. I couldn't look away. She noticed me staring and didn't appreciate it. Without warning, she thrust her spear straight at my face. The blade stopped a hair from my forehead. I didn't flinch, didn't blink, just smiled. She said I had guts, then realized I was a customer and got flustered. When the escort told her I'd killed an entire tiger alone, she refused to believe it. She started firing questions. What weapon? Where? How long did the chase take? I told her I came to do business, not answer interrogations. She got angry and blocked my path, demanding to know if the goods were stolen. Beautiful woman, but all her brains seemed to have migrated south to her chest. I'd never met someone that impressive looking with that little sense. Then the real boss appeared, Wu Santong, the head escort master. A composed, powerful-looking man with a square jaw and a calm authority that told me he'd been doing this for decades. Beside him was a thin, hunched man with sharp eyes, the agency's strategist, Advisor G. Wu Santong apologized for his daughter's rudeness, introduced himself properly, and listened to my proposal. When he heard about the complete tiger skeleton, he exchanged a look with his advisor and could barely contain his excitement. He assured me they had connections with every major medicine dealer in Tianyong City and would get me the best price. Then he started explaining the agency's fee structure, their cut of the profit margin. I agreed to the escort agency's standard commission terms without fuss. Wu Santong sent his advisor to appraise the tiger bones while we talked business. That's when his daughter came charging back over. Wu Santong cut her off before she could speak and apologized to me for her behavior. He knew her too well. She was dying to challenge me to a fight. She'd beaten almost every fighter in the county and spent her whole life obsessed with martial arts instead of learning any ladle-like skills. She was brilliant with weapons, though, especially her whip, which could crack wood and split stone. I couldn't help myself. I deliberately gave her a taunting look, raised my eyebrows, stared her down. She stomped her feet in fury. Wu Santong kept blocking her, but I kept provoking. Finally she snapped. Her whip lashed out at me like lightning while her father wasn't looking. Wu Santong's face went white. He knew that whip could kill. But I was ready. I flipped my axe and threw it spinning in a tight arc that snagged the whip, ripped it from her hand, and pinned it to a wooden pillar. One smooth motion. The entire courtyard went silent. Wu Santong's jaw dropped. Even he recognized that kind of precision as elite-level combat skill. Then Wu Xianyue said something that shocked everyone. "Father, I want a martial contest for my hand in marriage." She decided she wanted me. Right there, on the spot. Wu Santong nearly had a stroke. His daughter was already 18 and unmarried. The government fined the family every year for it. She'd rejected every suitor he'd found, including the county magistrate's son. But now she wanted to marry a farmer who already had 2 wives? As his third wife? He argued desperately. She was unmoved. Third wife, so what? Women shouldn't care about ranking. Are you worried I can't give him a son? I had to admit, I liked this girl. She was sharp, fearless, didn't care about social conventions, and could back up her attitude with real skill. Plus that body in that purple outfit wasn't exactly a downside. She ran off to fetch something. Her family's treasure bow. She said her father had once promised that any man who could draw that bow could marry her. She looked back at me over her shoulder with a challenging grin. "Hey, you, don't disappoint me." When she told me not to disappoint her, I fired back. "Who said I agreed to marry you?" "Don't flatter yourself." That stopped her cold. She actually looked hurt. Then she stuck out her chest and asked if she wasn't pretty enough, if her body wasn't good enough. Her father looked like he might have a stroke. I looked her over carefully and admitted she was beautiful and, yes, impressively built. But I told her I was a man of principle. I don't get pushed into anything by a woman, and I don't keep useless decorations around me. She insisted she wasn't decoration, said she could fight, read, write, and do anything a man could do. Then she played her trump card. Marry her, and the entire escort agency comes with the deal. Wu Santong's face twisted. His own daughter was giving away his life's work before she'd even left the house. But I was already thinking strategically. With her guarding my home, nobody would dare threaten my wives. And the agency's network of fighters and connections across the region would be invaluable for my plans. Meanwhile, Advisor G finished appraising the tiger bones. He valued them at 3,000 taels minimum, but quoted me a 10% commission, 300 taels. Outrageous. Then he smiled and hinted that if I could pull the family's treasure bow, the fee drops to 100. And if I beat the daughter in combat, it's free. I saw the game. I told them I'd pay the full 300 regardless. The extra 200 could count as a wedding gift. That caught everyone off guard. Nobody offered bride prices anymore in these desperate times. Wu Santong's opinion of me quietly shifted upward. Wu Xianyue came bouncing back with a dark wooden case. Inside was a bow called Pa Sui, made from aged wood, layered with wild ox horn and wrapped entirely in deer sinew. It required 5 stones of draw strength and could shoot over 500 paces. I picked it up and started pulling. The string hummed like iron. Every eye in the courtyard was on me. I got it halfway, 2 stones of force, and hit my limit. This body was still too weak. In my old body, I could have drawn it fully without breaking a sweat. But months of starvation and only weeks of recovery weren't enough. The escorts started whispering. 2 stones was impressive for a normal person, but it wasn't enough. Wu Santong breathed out in relief. Wu Xianyue's face fell, confused and disappointed. She'd been so sure I could do it. Wu Santong was celebrating that I couldn't pull the bow, laughing about how nobody in the whole county had ever managed it. But the first attempt was just me testing my raw strength with brute force. Drawing a bow like that requires technique, not just muscle. Wu Xianyue tried goading me, asked if I was deliberately failing, called me a coward afraid of a little girl. Then she switched tactics, grabbed my arm, and sweetly offered to make me tea before I tried again. The advisor chimed in that one more attempt couldn't hurt. Wu Santong glared at his own people for taking my side. I didn't need rest. I took one deep breath and channeled everything I had. Not raw power this time, but focused, concentrated force flowing through my whole body like a wave. The bow creaked. The string vibrated, and I pulled it to full draw. Wu Santong's smile froze on his face. The entire courtyard went dead silent. I set the bow down calmly and asked him what happens next. Before he could answer, Wu Xianhua jumped in. She said pulling the bow wasn't enough, we still had to fight. But not today. She wanted to set up a formal martial arts tournament for her hand in marriage in Tianyong City, when winter came and the rivers froze over. I was annoyed. I'd expected to settle things now, but she was firm, told me not to break the promise, then walked off with the bow tucked under her arm, beaming like a flower in bloom. The advisor pulled me aside to finalize the escort contract. He arranged 12 elite fighters, 5 decoy carriages, the real cargo hidden separately, with Wu Santong personally leading the convoy. Wu Xianhua wanted to go, but was ordered to stay and guard the agency while the main force was away. I paid the deposit, the full 300 taels including the wedding gift portion, signed the contract, and left my contact details. The money from the tiger bone sale would be delivered to my village. Wu Xianhua walked me out to the street, clearly reluctant to let me leave. That's where I bumped into my brother-in-law, with Xiaoyong, looking miserable. He collapsed onto my cart and started venting. First the gambling house got burned down. Now the pawn shop had been looted in broad daylight. Every last coin stolen, staff killed, the place destroyed. The county magistrate was furious because the pawn shop was actually his own business, run by one of his many nephews. Every officer in the county was working the case. I acted shocked and asked about leads. He said they had absolutely nothing. No witnesses willing to talk, no evidence, and someone had even taken the account books. Without those records, they couldn't even identify what was missing to search the markets. That was exactly why I'd taken the books. Gold and silver have traceable origins. But land deeds are just paper, impossible to track. The account books were sitting right under the cushion of my ox cart while he complained about them. He also confirmed something important. I shouldn't try to register my new land deeds right now. With the magistrate's people investigating property theft, showing up with dozens of reclaimed deeds would raise immediate suspicion. I'd wait until spring planting season when things calmed down. Before we parted, he asked sheepishly if I could spare some of my dear blood wine. I understood completely. He was a young married man who wanted to keep his wife happy. I promised to send him some. I tucked the land deeds away safely and got straight to work on my biggest project yet, a brick kiln. I'd picked the perfect spot, a patch of unclaimed wasteland near the hillside with a stream running beside it. Good access to both clay and water. The design was simple. Dig down into a thick earth bank, open a firing hole at the bottom. Old-fashioned, but effective. I'd seen this done in the countryside when I was young. The process was straightforward. Mix river mud with yellow clay, dry it, pick out the stones, soak it, then add water and rice husks. The critical step was treading the mud. You had to stomp through it barefoot until it became thick paste. Then mold the bricks, load the kiln, and fire for 4 or 5 days without letting the flames die. With enough hands, one batch takes half a month. With only a few people, it takes a year. I needed at least 2 batches before the ground froze. Not enough for a full house, but enough for a heated brick bed for winter and other essentials. The house itself would be wood-in-earth construction for now. Next morning, I had Tian Laoba round up every able body in the village, men and women both. 10 coins a day, meals included, start immediately. Wang Changxing woke up to find every single one of his workers had gone to my site instead. He was furious, convinced I was trying to bankrupt myself just to steal his position as village chief. He calculated my daily expenses and decided I'd run out of money soon enough. Then all these people would come crawling back to him. He showed up at the kiln site and saw the operation already in full swing. One crew digging the pit, another hauling river clay, women gathering firewood. He took one look and laughed. He figured out I was making bricks, did the math in his head, and decided it was a losing business. Cheap bricks nobody wanted to buy, costs eating up all the profit. He thought I was an idiot. He started coming every day, sitting in a chair with his teapot, watching us work for hours, convinced he was watching me burn through my savings. It made his day. 4 days later, the kiln was done. 5,000 brick molds were ready, loaded in, and the fires lit. One team went up the mountain cutting timber, good wood for my house, the rest for fuel. Another team kept making more molds. Meanwhile, at my old yard, I'd torn down everything. The broken walls, the rotting fence, all gone. In their place, leveled foundations for a real house, crushed stone pathways, a proper gate with a side entrance. The big tree near the road became a centerpiece surrounded by a flower bed. I built a covered shelter for the ox and cart, and next to it a bamboo chicken coop where the chicks, now the size of bulls, pecked happily at grain and wild grass. Wang Changsheng came by to inspect, and his eyes nearly popped out. This wasn't a poor man's repair job. This was the beginning of a compound. While I was busy at the kiln site, Wang Changsheng came snooping around my property. He noticed the large, heavily built shed in the back and got suspicious. His servant suggested climbing a tree to peek inside. The old fool scrambled up and spotted the black horse. He panicked. He thought I'd turn the horse over to the authorities with the prisoner, but there it was, hidden in my yard. He got so scared he snapped a branch and fell out of the tree, landing hard on his backside. He scrambled away before Wan Qing could see who it was, already muttering about reporting me for hiding a military horse, a crime punishable by execution of the entire family. He thought he'd finally found the weapon to destroy me. I knew nothing about this. I was watching the kiln fires burn, sweating, feeling proud of what we were building. Then I saw riders approaching down the road, the escort agency's banner snapping in the wind. Wu Xianyue came galloping up on horseback, face flushed, eyes shining. The moment she saw me, she called out, "Husband, I'm here," without a shred of shame. Advisor Ji groaned from his sedan chair at her complete lack of decorum. I told her not to call me that. If my wives heard, I'd be sleeping outside tonight. She turned even redder but didn't back down. She said she'd go explain things to my wives herself. The advisor handed me a box. The tiger bone sale had brought in 3,350 taels. After the agency's cut, my share was 3,050. Honest dealing, every coin accounted for. I respected that. Wu Xianyue insisted on coming inside for tea, obviously wanting to meet my wives. I didn't mind. The sisters had been planning to find me a concubine anyway, and I genuinely liked this girl. My yard was still under construction, messy with building materials everywhere. The sisters were flustered about hosting their first real guests in such a state. They rushed around setting out benches, boiling tea, straightening their clothes. When they saw Wu Xianyue walk in, tall, beautiful, dressed in her purple fighting outfit with a whip at her hip, followed by armed escorts and a banner, they got even more nervous. I introduced everyone calmly, explained that these were the people who'd sold the tiger bones in Tianyong City and had come to deliver the payment. The sisters bowed politely, clearly overwhelmed. Wu Xianyue just giggled at the whole scene. Wan Qing recognized Wu Xianyue's name immediately. She was famous around the county as a fierce warrior woman. The three of them hit it off fast. Wu Xianyue complimented the sisters, saying she understood why I couldn't stop thinking about them. The sisters blushed, probably guessing my thinking was mostly about nighttime activities. I left the women to chat and sat down with Advisor G. He noticed the construction and asked about my plans. I told him about the house, wood and earth structure, racing to finish before the snow came. He offered to let us stay at the escort agency for winter, but I declined. I told him I'd invented a new kind of heated brick bed that burns fuel underneath and keeps the whole room warm. Better than charcoal. He was fascinated and wanted to hear more. Then we heard Wan Qing squeal with delight from the backyard. Apparently Wu Xianyue had told them everything, and the sisters had enthusiastically agreed to the arrangement. Within minutes, the three of them were arm in arm like lifelong friends. Wu Xianyue even got both sisters up on the black horse and taught them basic riding. The horse already trusted them since they'd been feeding it daily. After the advisor and Wu Xianyue reluctantly left, I asked the sisters what they'd discussed. They told me Wu Xianyue had shared everything, and they were already planning the wedding, gifts, decorations, a new room, even cosmetics as their personal contribution. Wan Qing was determined to make it a proper ceremony, partly to make up for their own bare-bones wedding when they'd first married the old Lu Feng. I promised them I'd make it special. I'd use the occasion to give them a proper wedding celebration too, the one they never got. Looking at their happy faces, I felt an overwhelming urge to show them how much I loved them. Right there, right then. It was broad daylight. The front gate was wide open. Workers could walk in at any moment. Wan Qing protested weakly. Not here, not now, people might see. But neither of them actually resisted. We ended up on the tea table. An hour later, I finally went back to work. The sisters were still catching their breath, faces flushed, legs wobbly. Wanxing begged me to let her sleep tonight and just be with her sister instead. Wanxing gave her a look that said she wasn't volunteering for double duty either. I was standing outside my yard feeling good about everything when I spotted a group of officers walking toward me. Leading them was my own brother-in-law, Wu Xiaoyang. His face told me this wasn't a social visit. "Arrest him," he said. My stomach dropped, but I kept calm and didn't resist. He explained, someone had reported me for keeping a military horse. The county magistrate had ordered my arrest personally. It was a capital offense. They clamped a heavy wooden restraint around my neck and searched the property. The horse was right there in the back shed, no point hiding it. They let it out immediately. Inside, Wanqing heard the commotion and came running. When she saw me in chains and her own brother commanding the arrest, she fainted on the spot. Wanqing caught her and demanded an explanation. Wu Xiaoyang looked miserable. He didn't want to do this, but he was carrying the magistrate's direct orders. I stayed calm and told Wanqing to bring that thing to the county office to save me. She understood instantly. The silk pouch the old man had given me, the one he said could save a life in a moment of true crisis. She ran to get it, along with every tael of silver in the house. I knew who had done this. Wang Changsheng. He'd climbed that tree, seen the horse, and gone straight to the authorities. I briefly considered fighting my way out. A few officers wouldn't stop me, but I had too much invested here now. The brick kiln, the house, the land, Wu Xianyue and the escort agency connection. Running would throw it all away, so I gambled on the pouch. And if that failed, money could still talk. 2 hours later, I was standing in the county court. The magistrate sat under a huge wooden plaque, slammed his gavel, and demanded I confess. His advisor helpfully added that the punishment was execution. Then they called in their star witness. Wang Changsheng limped forward and dropped to his knees, groveling before the magistrate with a sickening smile. He pointed at the black horse standing in the courtroom and told his story, how he'd seen me bring it back with the barbarian prisoner, assumed I'd turned it in, then discovered I'd hidden it in my yard. He said he'd nearly broken his leg climbing a tree to confirm it. He had witnesses, his workers who'd all seen me ride into the village that day with the horse and prisoner. Just as I'd guessed, Wang Changxing was the informant. I didn't know how he'd discovered the horse, but in my mind, he was already a dead man. The magistrate was about to pronounce sentence when Wang Changxing interrupted with something worse. He pointed out that I'd gone from a penniless drunk to a wealthy man suspiciously fast, building kills, renovating property, spending freely. He suggested I might be the person who'd robbed the pawn shop. The magistrate's eyes lit up. He'd been desperate to close that case and recover thousands of taels. If he pinned it on me, he could confiscate everything I owned. 2 problems solved at once. He didn't care about truth. He saw an opportunity. He cut off Wu Xiaoyang when my brother-in-law tried to defend me, then slammed his gavel and sentenced me to death. Execution tomorrow at noon. Then a voice like a bronze bell echoed through the courtroom. Chun Dianyu, the prison warden, walked in and stood directly in the magistrate's line of sight. "Kill this man, and you die too," he said. The magistrate sputtered, but Chun placed a yellow silk pouch on the desk. The old man's pouch, the one I'd been told could save my life. The magistrate glanced at it dismissively, then froze. His face drained of color. The pouch was made with gold-threaded cloud silk, a material reserved exclusively for the imperial family. Only direct blood relatives of the emperor were permitted to possess it. Chen warned him not to open it. Whatever was inside, seeing it without authorization could mean death for his entire clan. The magistrate's hands were shaking now. I had no idea what was happening. I looked back at the sisters standing near the door. Wanqing had chased the arrest convoy on our ox cart, found Wu Xianyue at the escort agency, and together they'd gone to Chen Dianyu. The moment Chen saw the pouch, he'd understood its significance and rushed to the courthouse. The magistrate was now calling Chen, sir, instead of by his title. He begged for advice on what to do. Chen turned the conversation to the horse, praising how well it had been kept. Then he asked whether the magistrate had received orders from the provincial governor about a new military horse breeding program, implying there might be a perfectly legitimate reason for me to have the animal. Wang Changsheng was on his knees, forehead dripping sweat, not daring to breathe. He'd come to destroy me, and now he was terrified he'd stumbled into something far bigger than a village feud. The magistrate suddenly understood what Chun Dianyu was hinting at. He'd already received orders from the provincial governor about breeding military horses. He could turn this whole mess into a success story instead of a scandal. He cleared his throat and announced that after careful consideration, I was innocent of all charges. Not only that, he was appointing me to build a horse farm in Siwa village and breed war horses for the empire. The county had over 300 military horses in poor condition that would be transferred to my care. I'd receive 30 taels per month for feed, 10 taels for each successfully bred foal, and 30 for each battle-ready horse. I could barely contain myself. A horse farm was a gold mine. The monthly stipend alone was more than most families earned in a year. And controlling hundreds of horses in this era was like owning a fleet of trucks in the modern world. Then the magistrate turned on Wang Chongsheng. He accused him of making false accusations against a fellow villager and stripped him of the village chief position on the spot, giving it to me instead. He sentenced Wang Chongsheng to 100 strikes with the rod. The old man screamed for mercy, smashing his forehead against the floor until it bled, but the gavel had already fallen. They dragged him out and beat him until he passed out. With his existing injuries from the boar attack, he'd be lucky to survive. Chen Jianyu walked me to the county horse yard. The 300 horses were a sorry sight. Thin, poorly fed, dull-coated. The magistrate had obviously been pocketing the feed money. But the bones were good. With proper nutrition, they'd recover. Chun told me about a famous general heading to our border, a woman called the Red Feather General, commander of the Fengling army. She'd been appointed by the emperor himself at just 16. She fought with twin swords, wore blue armor with a white cape, and was considered the greatest warrior in the empire. He said joining her army was every soldier's dream. I joked that if I joined, she'd probably end up as my fourth wife. Chen laughed and said the general's 4 lieutenants would skin me alive for saying that. Next day, I took possession of all 300 horses. Tian Lao Ba organized the entire village, and we threw up a basic horse farm in a single day. The county sent a low-ranking stable officer, 3 constables, and 30 soldiers to guard the operation. The officer lasted one night in our crude grass shelters before running back to town. Feeding 300 horses through winter was an enormous challenge. I mobilized every woman in the village to prepare fodder and asked Wu Xianyue to use the escort agency's network to buy grain husks and wheat bran from across the region. Half a month later, the first frost arrived, and my first batch of bricks came out of the kiln successfully. The first kiln produced over 4,000 usable bricks, more than enough for my winter projects. When the next rotation of soldiers arrived to guard the horse farm, my brother-in-law Wu Xiaoyang was among them. I immediately put him and 2 constables to work helping me build. I showed him my latest invention, a heated brick bed connected to the cooking stove. When you light the fire for cooking, the heat travels through channels under the bed and warms the entire room. He'd never seen anything like it and was skeptical at first, but I told him to wait and see. It took 2 days to finish the stove and heated bed, and 3 more days for the house frame to be sealed with a roof. Finally, after weeks in that rotting straw shack, we had a real home with solid walls and warmth. Over dinner, stewed pheasant, meat porridge, and deer blood wine, which Xiaoyang got serious. He warned me about bandits. 3 major groups operated in the area. The biggest was a mountain gang called Heaven's Peak. Then there was Hai Lu Peak. But the most dangerous was the downstream fortress, based where 7 waterways merged near the county border. They had hundreds of fighters and turned savage every winter when the rivers froze and their income from tolls and fishing dried up. They'd raided villages, even attacked military supply convoys. He pointed out something I hadn't fully considered. 300 military horses were an enormous prize. On the black market, a single horse sold for over 100 taels. If the downstream fortress learned about my farm, they'd come with everything they had. The 50 green soldiers the county had assigned me were useless, fresh conscripts who couldn't even hold their swords properly. They'd be wiped out in minutes. That settled it. I needed to build my own fighting force. A hunting squad that could double as a private militia. Men who knew the mountains, could shoot, and would fight when needed. During peacetime, they'd earn money bringing in game. In a crisis, they'd be my defense. Meanwhile, Wang Jian and the others had finally gotten competent with their bows under my training. They were bringing in enough pheasants and rabbits that I didn't even need to hunt anymore. And once the heavy snow came, I planned one more trip to find that deer herd again, another big payday. I started building my fighting force immediately. I tested Wang Dian, Zhang Hongda, and Li Long on their archery, then had them mass-produce arrows while I carved 6 new hardwood bows. I selected 6 more reliable young men from the village, making 9 total. I organized them into 3-man squads, the same formation that had won great battles in my previous world. Each of my 3 disciples led a squad, and I sent them into the mountains to learn by doing. 2 days later, Tian Lao Ba came running to me in a panic. The horse farm was about to run out of feed. The escort agency's delivery was a day late, and we only had 2 days of reserves left. 300 horses eat an enormous amount every day. Then the delivery finally arrived, but the escorts were battered, limping, bleeding. I asked what happened. They told me they'd been attacked by the bear on the mountain road. Wu Santong had fought it hand-to-hand to protect the supply wagons and was badly mauled. Wu Xianyue had literally pulled her father out of the bear's jaws. She'd sent the lightly wounded escorts ahead with the feed while she rushed her father back to town for treatment. Worse, the escorts handed me back all the money I'd paid. Wu Santong felt that failing to deliver on time was a breach of honor, so he was returning everything. The agency couldn't continue taking contracts in their current state. That made me angry, not at them, but at the situation. These people were hurt because of my business. I wasn't taking that money back. I rode my horse to the agency immediately. The smell of medicine hit me before I even reached the main hall. Dozens of clay pots lined the corridors, all boiling herbs. Wu Santong lay on a wooden board in the main hall, too injured to be moved to a bed. Wu Xianyue was beside him, eyes swollen from crying, raging about killing the bear. She'd already gone looking for it that morning with some escorts, but came back empty-handed. Now she wanted to take the family's treasure bow, the one she couldn't fully draw, and try again. Advisor Ji was barely holding her back, arguing that if something happened to her too, the agency and her father would both be finished. Then she said something that cut through her fury. I can't draw it, but I know someone who can. I'll go find him. If he's too afraid to help, then I was blind to ever like him. That's when I walked in. She turned and saw me crossing the courtyard toward her. The relief on her face nearly broke my heart. I rushed into the main hall, and my stomach dropped. Wu Santong was in terrible shape, bandages soaked with blood on his chest, arms, legs, and worst of all, his abdomen, where the bear had slashed him open. If he hadn't twisted away at the last second, that hit would have killed him instantly. Only years of martial arts training had kept him alive this long. 2 local doctors shook their heads and said there was nothing they could do. Even the best physician couldn't save him. They could only slow things down and give him a few more days. Wu Xianyue broke down crying again, begging me to avenge her father. I snapped at her. Her father wasn't dead yet, so stop crying. I examined Wu Santong carefully. Most of his wounds were surface level. No damaged organs, no major blood loss. The real danger was infection. He was burning with fever. The wounds were already going bad. Without treatment, he'd be gone in 2 or 3 days. If I had antibiotics, this would be simple. But in this ancient world, I had to improvise. I ordered the doctors to brew honeysuckle, forsythia, and dandelion, natural antibacterial herbs, and force-feed him every half hour. They complained they'd never seen such a prescription. I didn't care. Then I asked the advisor for garlic and mugwort. Garlic contains natural compounds that fight infection. I'd also studied how to extract artemisinin from mugwort in my previous life. Crude by modern standards, but usable. The doctors resisted, but advisor Ji overruled them. He trusted me. I told the injured escorts I wouldn't abandon any of them. That calmed the room. Wu Xianyue asked what she should do. I told her, get ready, we're going to kill that bear. Her eyes went wide. Just the 2 of us? I looked around the courtyard full of wounded men and nodded. There was nobody else. She steeled herself immediately. She said she wasn't afraid to die beside me. She wanted to bring the family's treasure bow, but I stopped her. Too heavy, too slow to draw. My crossbow would do more damage. I mounted my horse and reached down to pull her up behind me. She froze, suddenly shy about sitting so close, pressed against my back with her arms around my waist. I teased her about her boldness disappearing at the worst possible moment. That did the trick. She jumped up, locked her arms around me, and held on tight. The horse, that clever animal, deliberately made the ride as bumpy as possible, bouncing her against my back with every stride. She couldn't figure out why the horse was acting up. I blamed it on the stallion not having seen a mare in too long. She squeezed tighter, which only made things more interesting. I was already thinking ahead. Wu Xianyue was athletic, fierce, full of energy. Once I married her and she joined the household, having 4 people sharing one bed was going to make every night feel like being emperor. We rode hard out of the city. The whole way, Wu Xianyue clung to my back, and the bumpy road made the experience quite enjoyable for me. She had no idea what was happening to her body. She'd never been this close to a man before. She actually asked me if she'd been infected by the bear because she felt dizzy and her heart was racing. I just smiled and kept riding. An hour later, we reached the attack site. Overturned carts, scattered feed, and vegetables everywhere. The bear had eaten some of the produce. A good sign, actually. A bear that's eating vegetables isn't starving, which means it wouldn't fight with the desperate fury of a truly hungry predator. I tied up the horse and checked its behavior. Calm, relaxed. The bear wasn't nearby. Good. We had time to prepare. I gave Wu Xianyue my hunting bow and kept the crossbow and spear for myself. Then I explained my plan. We'd set a snare trap. We couldn't dig a pit big enough in time, but we could bend a flexible tree into a spring-loaded rope trap. It wouldn't hold a bear for long, but even a few seconds of confusion would give us an opening. She doubted it could work against something that powerful. I told her I only needed it to hold for a moment. We found a good tree, bent it down together, rigged the snare, and camouflaged it with leaves. Then we hid and waited. Soon enough, heavy sounds came from the trees. I signaled Wu Xianyue to stay still and crept out as bait, crossbow ready. The bear appeared, massive, black-furred, standing upright at nearly 10 feet tall, 3 times as wide as me. It slammed its paws on the ground and roared. I understood now how Wang Fei had died so easily. Those boys were lucky any of them survived. The bear locked onto me and charged. I aimed for its head but hit the shoulder instead. The thing was moving too fast. The bolt sank into the thick fat layer. It hurt the bear enough to enrage it, but caused no real damage. Exactly what I wanted. Now it was furious and focused entirely on me. I turned and ran toward the trap. The bear came thundering after me. But right at the critical moment, Wu Xianyue panicked. The bear's roar had shaken her, and she involuntarily swung her sword, triggering the snare prematurely. The rope snapped around my ankle instead of the bear's. The bent tree whipped upward, and suddenly I was hanging upside down in the air. I was hanging upside down by my neck, weapons falling off me. In that split second, I clamped my feet around my falling spear and held on. The snare was made for a bear, not a man. The vine loop was too big to hold me tight. My hands and legs were free. The bear charged straight underneath me, rearing up to swat at my chest. That was exactly the opening I needed. As I dropped, I drove the spear downward with all the force of gravity behind it. The blade punched straight through the bear's skull, between its eyes. The massive body collapsed and actually cushioned my fall. I rolled off without a scratch. I pulled at the spear, but only the wooden shaft came out. The iron tip was buried so deep inside the skull, it was gone for good. 3 taels of silver, lost in a bear's brain. Wu Xianyue dropped her sword, shaking all over. She thought I was dead. She ran to me crying, threw her arms around my neck, and kept saying she was sorry, that she'd almost killed me. I tilted her chin up and told her she owed me compensation. Before she could figure out what I meant, I kissed her. She went completely rigid, hands frozen in the air, body trembling, mind blank. She'd never been kissed in her life. I held her gently and softened the pressure until she relaxed. Then she surprised me. She closed her eyes and kissed back. She told herself it was just compensation, nothing scary about a kiss. She'd seen the young escorts sneaking off to the brothel plenty of times. When I pulled her closer and pressed her body fully against mine, her bravery collapsed. She pushed me away, hands guarding her chest, face burning red, gasping. But then, this girl, she gathered her courage, marched back to me, and basically attacked my mouth. No technique whatsoever, just raw, honest, wild. After a moment, she whispered that touching was allowed, but only over the clothes. She actually took my hand and placed it herself. Just when I thought I had her figured out, she jumped back like a startled rabbit and announced that this was all I was getting until the wedding. If I wanted more, I should go home to my wives or make sure the martial arts tournament happened soon. And if I lost that fight, she'd kill me on the spot and then herself. She refused to ride the horse back. I had to sweet-talk her into it. The whole ride home, her face stayed red, and she wouldn't look at me. On the ride back, I promised my horse 2 Mares as a reward for his excellent performance today. He got so excited he nearly bucked me off. I had to negotiate him down. 2 Mares, final offer, take it or leave it. At the escort agency, I sent some fighters to retrieve the bear carcass, while others collected the scattered feed for my horse farm. It was too late to ride home, so I stayed the night. I got to work immediately on Wu Santong. Advisor G had followed my instructions, feeding the herbal medicine every hour and gathering fresh garlic. Wu Santong's condition hadn't worsened, which was good. Wu Xianyue and a few female disciples peeled and minced a mountain of garlic. I rigged together a crude distillation setup from every bottle and jar in the agency, then extracted the concentrated liquid from the garlic. We applied it directly to Wu Santong's wounds and had him drink the extract along with the other badly injured escorts. The 3 local doctors watched with open contempt. They were waiting for Wu Santong to die so they could say I told you so. Next morning, I went to the market for a new spear tip and bow materials, then headed home. I left instructions for the garlic treatment to continue. Shortly after I left, Wu Santong woke up. When he found out it was me who'd saved him, not the doctors, and that I'd also killed the bear that had nearly killed him, the man couldn't believe it. He'd underestimated me from the start, thinking I was just a strong farmer. Now I'd saved his life, treated his men's wounds, refused to take back the contract money, and even sent meat to feed the injured escorts. Advisor G drove the point home. He told Wu Santong that I was now running a government horse farm, had connections across the county, and was clearly destined for greatness. A son-in-law like me was a gift, not a compromise. Wu Santong wrestled with his pride for a while, but the facts were overwhelming. I'd single-handedly kept his agency alive through multiple contracts. I'd saved his life with medicine nobody else could provide. I'd killed the bear that nearly ended him, and his daughter was hopelessly in love with me. He slapped his thigh, which hurt because it was still wounded, and declared they'd all come visit me in Siwa village the very next day to express their gratitude in person. When I got back to the village, both my wives had fallen asleep outside waiting for me in the cold. I carried them to bed one at a time. Then I went to visit Wang Changsheng. After his 100 strokes at the courthouse, he was bedridden. His brother was dead, his wife divorced, his workers had all come to work for me, and even his steward had disappeared. The once proud Wang estate was empty and decaying, with just a cook and 2 servants left. When the servant led me in, Wang Changsheng saw me and screamed in terror, trying to hide in the corner of his bed. He knew what kind of person I was and what he'd tried to do to me in court. I sat on his bed and asked him one simple question. Did he want to live? He said yes, he'd do anything. I told him I wanted every piece of land the Wang family owned, every deed, every document. I held up 5 fingers. He guessed 500 taels. I slapped him across the face. 50 taels. For everything. Generations of accumulated Wang family wealth. The farmland, the house, the savings. All for 50 taels. He called me shameless. He said I was robbing him. He was right, and I didn't care. When he saw me pick up a book and glance at his still healing backside, he broke immediately. He told me where everything was hidden. I cleaned out the entire estate. Gold, silver, 2 full boxes of property deeds and house documents. Then I dropped a 50-tael banknote on his bed. I told him the Wang residence was now the Lu residence. As the new village chief, I was ordering him to leave within 3 days. If he was still here after that, I'd have him dragged out. On my way out, I jumped up and ripped the Wang family nameplate off the wall, stomped it into splinters, and told the cook to use it for firewood. The 50 taels wasn't generosity. It was calculated. Wang Changsheng would have to travel through bandit territory to leave the county. 50 taels was exactly enough to catch a bandit's attention. If they robbed and killed him on the road, that solved my problem permanently, and it wouldn't be connected to me. If he somehow survived, he'd be too broken and too far away to matter. Either way, Wang Changsheng was finished. I needed to deal with the bandit problem around the county. The downstream fortress was the most dangerous, hundreds of killers protected by a maze of waterways. The other 2 gangs were smaller, about 80 to 100 men each. Still too many for me to fight alone while protecting everything I'd built. I'd already asked Wu Xianyue to arrange contact with Heaven's Peak, the gang that controlled the mountain road the escort agency used. Their arrangement was simple: pay a toll, pass safely. Walking home with the boxes of Wang family valuables, I sensed someone in the tree above me. I kept walking casually. A man dropped down behind me and pressed a blade to my back. He recited a coded phrase, the recognition signal Wu Xianyue had set up. He was from Heaven's Peak. His name was Wang Dinglu. Short, thin, poorly dressed, but sharp. I, accidentally, dropped the box, letting silver coins spill out. I wanted to test his reaction. He noticed the money, but his eyes stayed clear. No greed. Good sign. He kept proper distance even after confirming identities. Disciplined. I gave him a job. Wang Changsheng would be leaving the county within 3 days with about 50 taels, traveling with just 2 servants and a cook. I wanted Heaven's Peak to intercept him. Wang Dinglu understood immediately. Easy target, guaranteed payday, minimal effort. He left through the forest like a shadow. I was impressed. If the whole gang was this professional, they'd be worth recruiting someday. Good men forced into banditry by desperate times. Back home, the sisters were waiting again. I scolded them for standing in the cold, told them if they got sick, it would affect their ability to have children. That worked instantly. They went straight inside. I sent Tian Lao Ba with 3 men and the ox cart into the mountains to dig up the entire sweet potato field I discovered. They brought back 3 full cartloads, a small mountain of sweet potatoes. Since they can't survive freezing, we stored them all inside the new house. These would be critical for spring planting. I now own nearly all the farmland in the village, and sweet potatoes would be perfect for the dry hillside plots, drought-resistant and high-yielding. I had Wanqing steam some and make sweet potato porridge while Wanqing finished drying out the new heated brick bed. Then I headed to the horse farm. The 300 horses were looking better already, coats getting shinier, posture improving. Winter feed would be a challenge, but by spring they'd be fully recovered. I found my horse Wuzhui, standing between the 2 mares I'd promised him, looking indecisive. I slapped his rear and told him to get to work, 10 times a day minimum. I wanted those mares pregnant. If I could crossbreed his northern stamina and speed with the local horse's larger size, the offspring could be the perfect warhorse. And perfect warhorses meant sitting at home counting silver. I'd carefully organized my operation. Tian Lao Ba ran the horse farm. He was the sharpest of my 3 original men and could handle dealing with county officials. Wang San managed the brick kiln since he knew woodworking and the mountains. Yang the limper, the most honest and dependable, handled the house construction and would oversee the sweet potato fields come spring. These 3 plus my 9 hunters formed the core of everything I was building. After checking the horse farm and brick kiln, I came home to find the sisters had prepared sweet potato porridge with wild boar meat and warm wine wrapped in oiled paper. These 2 were incredible homemakers. I hugged them both and kissed them hard. Wanqing mentioned her childhood friend had written back. She wanted to meet us in Tianyong City for the Great Snow Festival, the biggest celebration of the year, even bigger than New Year. The whole city would be full of feasts and markets. This worked perfectly for me, since Wu Xianyue's martial arts tournament was also set for after the first snowfall in Tianyong City. I could meet the friend, attend the festival, and win myself a 3rd wife all in one trip. I grabbed a basket of wine and sweet potato porridge and headed up the hill to visit the old feng shui master. His flowers had all died with the season, leaves piled thick at his door. I walked in talking to him. Brought your favorite wine, made you porridge. Why aren't you inside by the fire, you stubborn old man? Then I reached his chair. The teacup was empty. His face was peaceful. No breath. He'd passed away, quietly, alone, exactly as he'd probably wanted. I buried him behind his house facing northwest, just as he'd asked. No name on the stone. No ceremony. He'd prepared his own coffin long ago. Going through his belongings, I found a small dagger. It was extraordinary. When I tested it against my axe, the axe blade chipped while the dagger stayed perfect. This was refined steel, something that shouldn't exist in this era. A blade that could cut through iron like butter. The old man had left me another priceless gift, even in death. That dagger gave me an idea. I needed to build a furnace and start smelting steel. With bandits threatening my growing operation, I couldn't keep buying weapons piecemeal. I needed to arm my own men properly. That meant finding a skilled blacksmith and carpenter to bring to the village. That evening, Wanqing came out with a coat, worried I'd catch cold sitting outside thinking. I pulled her onto my lap and told her no coat could be as warm as my two wives. She blushed from her cheeks down to her chest, protesting softly, but she unbuttoned her top and pressed against me without any real resistance. Next morning, Wu Santong himself showed up with the feed delivery, despite his injuries. He'd come to personally thank me for saving his life. He kept calling me brother, which was awkward since I was basically dating his daughter. I pointed that out. He laughed and said if Wu Xianyue and I ended up married, he'd simply be both my father-in-law and my brother. Martial arts people don't worry about formalities, he said. He offered to sell the bear carcass in Tianyong City for free, no commission. The whole agency felt they owed me too much to take money. I accepted without arguing. Then we got down to the real business. Wu Santong knew I'd connected with the Heaven's Peak bandits, and he'd come with a plan to deal with the downstream fortress, the river pirates blocking the southern trade route I needed for horse feed. His strategy was solid. He'd travel south by river, let the pirates intercept him, then dangle my horse farm as bait. Tell them about 300 poorly guarded military horses nearby. The pirates would send their main force to raid the farm. Meanwhile, his escorts would ambush them on the road with traps and weapons. Once the fortress was emptied out, Heaven's Peak would raid their undefended base. It wasn't bad thinking, but it involved too many people, too many moving parts. Borrowing soldiers from the county, coordinating with Heaven's Peak, recruiting villagers who could swim. One leak anywhere and the whole thing collapses. Plus casualties meant compensation costs. I shook my head. Too complicated. He asked if I had something better. I leaned in close and whispered my plan. Just 2 words made his face change: pine resin and fire oil. His eyes went from shock to fear to excitement. No army needed. No ambush. No complicated coordination. Just fire, delivered to a fortress built on a river island surrounded by dry winter vegetation. He slapped his thigh and agreed on the spot. He'd personally acquire all the fire oil and pine resin I needed. Wu Santong wanted to move fast. Do it tonight. He left to gather every drop of fire oil and pine resin in the county, even pulling 30 barrels of military-grade oil from the county stockpile. The total cost was over 100 taels, filling 2 full carts. My plan was simple. The fortress sat on an island where 7 rivers met, the perfect defensive position, but also a perfect trap. I'd block the downstream escape route with wet logs strung on cables, then pour fire oil and pine resin into the upstream current. Once the oil spread across the entire water surface surrounding the island, light it up. Their fortress becomes a furnace with no exit. I gathered my 9 hunters. Their training had paid off. My 3 disciples could hit targets at 100 paces without missing, and the other 6 weren't far behind. I'd organized them by strengths. Wang Dian handled tactics and direct assault. Zhang Hongda was fast and sharp-eyed for scouting. Li Long was the careful one, our sniper covering the rear. By evening, we were hidden in the dried reeds near the fortress. We watched small boats returning to base as the pirates came home from robbing river traffic. We waited for them all to come in. Wu Santong's swimmers went first, 3 escort fighters, all former fishermen. They slipped underwater and silently punctured holes in all 40 pirate boats, cutting just above the waterline so the leaks wouldn't show until someone actually boarded. I swam to shore myself, killed 2 sentries with my steel dagger, quick and silent, then signaled everyone to pour oil along the banks and through the water. Not the docks, though. I told them those would be ours after tonight. No burning our own future property. When replacement guards came out and found the dead sentries, they started screaming alarms. Perfect timing. I gave the order. Tian Lao Ba dropped the blocking cables downstream. The oil teams poured everything they had. Over 100 torches hit the water surface simultaneously, making it look like 1,000 soldiers had surrounded the island. The fire oil needed about 5 minutes to spread across the compressed waterway. We'd narrowed it to about 70 meters with the barriers. My 9 archers stood ready with fire arrows. Inside the fortress, the pirates saw the wall of light approaching and panicked. Dozens of them grabbed torches and rushed toward their boats, the same boats we'd just sabotaged. I smiled, loaded my crossbow, and took aim at the first runner. I fired the first bolt. It punched clean through a pirate running for the boats. That set off the chaos I wanted. My 10 archers couldn't cover the entire water surface at once, so timing was everything. Once the first patches of oil caught fire, I ordered my shooters to rain arrows down. The pirates couldn't focus on putting out flames while dodging arrows. They panicked exactly as I'd planned. The fire oil spread without resistance. Some pirates managed to launch boats, thinking they'd escaped. Then water started pouring through the holes we'd drilled. They screamed and tried to turn back, but it was too late. More torches hit the water. The entire river surface erupted into a wall of fire. Pirates on boats burned alive. Those who jumped in found the water itself was on fire. The reeds along the banks caught next, creating towering walls of flame on every side. Wu Santong asked why I hadn't burned the docks too. Wouldn't that have been simpler? I explained the logic. Corner 100 desperate men with zero escape, and they'll fight like demons. Leave one visible exit, and they'll all stampede toward it instead of organizing resistance. The dock area and one river mouth were deliberately left clear, my gift of hope to panicking men. That river mouth had fast-flowing current and no oil, but it led straight into my ambush. Any pirate who made it through by boat arrived exhausted into a wall of arrows from my hunters. Anyone who tried swimming through the rapids reached shore only to meet escort fighters with swords. Wu Santong finally understood. He walked around studying the whole setup and realized I'd built a funnel, surround on 3 sides, leave one opening that looks like salvation but is actually a killing ground. The escape route is the death route, he said quietly. He looked at me differently after that. The fire burned for about an hour, thanks to the pine resin extending the burn time. When it died down, the shore was littered with bodies. Tian Lao Ba counted 41 dead on the banks, 11 caught in the downstream cables, 30 killed by arrows at the river mouth, 14 cut down by escort fighters on shore. Out of roughly 100 pirates, fewer than 20 survived somewhere in the wreckage. I told Wu Santong to hold position overnight while I waited for dawn to go in and finish the survivors. He nodded, deeply impressed. A problem the county government had failed to solve for years, and we'd ended it in one night with fire and patience. At first light, the fortress was still smoldering. I pulled out the small boats I'd hidden upstream before the battle and prepared to cross the river for the final sweep. I stepped onto the island at dawn. The stench of charred flesh filled the air. Burned bodies lay everywhere across the open ground. I walked through the wreckage to the main hall, the only structure still partly standing. A handful of survivors had made it through the night by soaking the building with water and digging a firebreak around it. But the smoke had choked them and the heat had drained whatever strength they had left. I could count the living on one hand. In the back of the room, the fortress leader sat gripping a large blade. He was barely able to move, but his eyes burned with hatred. My hunters drew their bows, but I waved them off. I sent them to sweep the rest of the island, find every last survivor, collect all weapons, valuables, and check for hidden cellars. Everything useful goes on the boats. The leader demanded to know what grudge I had against his 100 men. I sat down across from him and explained it plainly. No grudge. He was blocking my trade route. His men would have killed mine eventually, and his head was worth 300 taels to the county government, plus another 100 for wiping out the rest. Pure business. He screamed and lunged at me with his sword, but he had nothing left. I pulled him down with one hand, then put my dagger through him. As he died, I told him this place belonged to the Liu family now. I walked outside into the morning light. A beautiful sunrise. Not a bad way to start the day. We cleared the dead, burned the remains, and loaded everything onto boats, 7 full loads, then transferred to 15 carts. Not as much treasure as I'd expected. About 50 bushels of grain, 200 taels of silver, some weapons, and damaged armor. For a gang that terrorized an entire waterway, they were pathetically poor. Wang Chongqing's household had been richer. Advisor Ji cataloged everything while I slept through the afternoon. When I woke up, he explained that river pirates only intercepted small boats. The big cargo ships took the main channels. In a famine year, hardly anyone was shipping goods through these backwaters anyway. Then he told me where the real money was. Hai Lu Peak, the mountain fortress controlling the mainland route to Tianyong City. Unlike the river pirates, they sat on a major trade road surrounded by wealthy villages. The escort agency alone paid them over 100 taels annually in tolls. Every merchant heading to the city paid too. Their accumulated wealth was enormous. The government bounty on them was 1,500 taels, 500 just for the leader's head. The fortress itself was a former military outpost with proper walls and defenses. The county had sent troops before and failed. This would be a much harder target than burning river pirates. I filed that away for later and called in Li Hui, one of my reliable workers. With winter settling in, the grass-cutting crews had no work. I sent him to dismantle whatever salvageable buildings remained at the river fortress and haul the materials back to build a large, sturdy warehouse next to the brick kiln. I sent Li Hui home to rest and turned back to Advisor G. I asked him why Tianyong City's garrison didn't just wipe out the Hai Lu Peak bandits, since they had hundreds of soldiers available. He explained something that disgusted me. Bandit suppression was a business. Every time the government launched a campaign, they'd collect special taxes from the people first. Then they'd attack just enough to weaken the bandits, but never destroy them completely. That way, next year they could collect taxes again for another campaign. Everyone in power profited from keeping the bandits alive. Now that famine had dried up the wealthy family's money, nobody was funding campaigns, so the bandits were left alone entirely. It was a racket, and if I wiped them out, I'd technically be cutting into the government's revenue stream. Something to think about, but not a reason to stop. G and I headed to the county together. I had two goals: collect the bounty for destroying the river fortress and find a good blacksmith to recruit. At the smithy, Old Song was busy. The county government had given him a huge order: 1,000 horseshoes and 10,000 arrowheads, with raw iron, were provided. He was working day and night with his two apprentices. He couldn't take on my work right now. I noticed something interesting watching the ore delivery. Iron was strictly controlled as a strategic resource. Civilian blacksmiths only got limited amounts. But clever smiths like Song would deliberately keep some material from government orders, then smelt the leftovers into good iron they could sell privately. Up to 30% extra on each batch, a very profitable side hustle. Since Song was unavailable, I asked if he knew anyone else. He thought for a moment and told me about his senior apprentice brother, a man with even better skills and a true passion for metalwork. But there was a problem. The man had abandoned his forge in Tianyong City after falling in love with a girl at the local brothel. He'd spent everything trying to buy her freedom and now lived like a beggar outside the pleasure house, refusing to leave. A master blacksmith driven mad by love for a prostitute. I found that both ridiculous and oddly admirable. A true romantic fool. So I headed to the brothel to find him. Standing at the entrance, I felt the irony. The old Lu Feng used to stand here drooling, too poor to go inside. Now I was back, wealthy and powerful, and the place just made me feel disgusted. Right outside the brothel, I found the man Song had described. Filthy, hair matted, looking like a beggar. Two doormen were cursing at him, while a heavily made-up woman named Ruhua sneered from inside. She was brutal. She mocked him for thinking he deserved her, called him a toad dreaming of swan meat. He protested. She'd promised to buy her own freedom and marry him once she had enough money. He'd given her over 1,000 taels of silver, every coin he'd earned from his forge. She laughed and listed all the things she'd spent it on: food, clothes, cosmetics, his room, and board. Now that he was broke, she wanted him gone. Classic. He'd been completely played. I called out his name: Zhang Tizui, Iron Hammer. He looked up with wild eyes and immediately tried to search my pockets for money. I shoved him off. He came at me again, actually groping at my chest. A grown man pawing at me. I was more amused than angry. I kicked him down. He surprised me, though. Mid-fall, he flipped himself upright with one hand and launched a spinning kick attack. Not bad footwork for a beggar. I blocked with my shin. He felt like he'd kicked an iron post, then punched him unconscious with one hit. Good reflexes, decent fighting instinct, but no stamina. Years of starving outside a brothel had wrecked his body. The doorman came out looking for trouble, but I flashed a 10-tael silver ingot and suddenly I was, sir, and honored guest. I told them I was here for Ruhua and to bring the unconscious man along. Inside the private room, they laid out food and wine. Ruhua entered with a fan hiding her face, ready to perform. When she lowered the fan and spotted Iron Hammer slumped on the table, her face froze. She tried to have him thrown out, but I stopped her. I kicked a stool across the room and told her to sit on the floor. She stumbled and fell, stunned. I told her plainly, I had zero interest in brothel women. She should sit there quietly and not get any ideas. She was furious inside but kept smiling. 20 taels was 20 taels. She swallowed her pride and sat where I told her. I put 100 tael banknote on the table and told Ruhua to leave with Iron Hammer. This money would buy her freedom. She barely glanced at the beggar beside her. Instead, she turned on the charm toward me, offering to follow me instead for 500 taels, promising endless bedroom pleasures. She shifted from pretending to have morals to shameless seduction in seconds flat. I nearly threw up my food. Iron Hammer woke up. I silenced them both with a chopstick thrown into the wooden pillar behind his head. It sank 3 inches deep. That got their full attention. I asked Iron Hammer why he was so obsessed with this woman. His story poured out. He claimed Ruhua was his childhood sweetheart, a girl he'd sworn to marry. When he stumbled into this brothel years ago visiting his apprentice brother Song, he recognized her and devoted everything to saving her. Then I turned to Ruhua. Under pressure, the truth came out. She wasn't his childhood love at all. Her real name was Li Xianlian, not Li Ruhua. She was a refugee who'd been taken in by the brothel madam for her looks. She'd lied about being his old flame to milk him for money. Over 1,000 taels, all gone. Iron Hammer heard this and still refused to accept it. He begged her to come with him anyway, said he didn't care, wanted 10 children and a quiet farm life together. The man was hopeless, but I'd already noticed something in his eyes from the start. Beneath the desperate love, there was knowledge. He'd known deep down all along that this woman wasn't his real Ruhua. He'd been pouring his grief and longing for the real girl into this imposter because he couldn't face 10 years of failed searching. I slapped him 3 times. That broke the dam. He collapsed crying, calling out for the real Ruhua, the girl he'd been searching for a decade, the one who vanished and never sent word. He begged her ghost to appear in his dreams and tell him where she was. I let him cry it out. Then I handed him a cup of wine. I'll help you find her, I said. But look at yourself. Even if I find her tomorrow, would you want her seeing you like this? I laid out the deal. Come work for me. I'd give him a forge, food, housing, and pay. I'd use my connections to search for the real Ruhua. When we found her, they'd both work under me. I'd treat them well, but no betrayal. He stared at me through swollen eyes, not quite believing. I had the leftover food packed up. Good dishes shouldn't go to waste. My wives and workers could enjoy them. Iron Hammer agreed to come with me, but on his terms. He'd work when he felt like it, and if things didn't suit him, he'd leave.